Hello everyone, this is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was bound by the fate seal and forced into destiny with Anko Mitarashi, Kuretsuchi and Mabui? Part 2. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. So that's why you asked me about what Naruto-kun meant when he said that you should see me. Well, I suppose that makes sense. You didn't know about the council meeting that we had yesterday. During that time, Sarutobi said as Anko stared at him with a very curious gaze. She had long since left the Forest of Death, and Naruto's house, behind to go and speak with her Hokage. Luckily the old man wasn't busy so Anko could pop in, but she couldn't stay for very long. She did have her own work as the INT department in a few hours. Nodding her head to Sarutobi's statement, Anko said, "Yeah, what did the Gaki mean by that?" Anko asked and Sarutobi took a puff of smoke from his pipe before the smoke filled the air. This, of course, didn't bother Anko as she had been around such things all her life. Right now she would just be patient and allow her village leader to gather his thoughts on the matter. Naruto-kun, apparently, makes weapons, Sarutobi said simply. Anko blinked and placed a hand on her hip, letting her trench coat sway for a little before settling. Why would he do that? Konoha has some pretty good weapons makers. Don't you think that's unnecessary of the Gaki to do so? Anko asked. Sarutobi shook his head as, in his mind, he probably knew why the blonde had done so. It had really saddened him a great deal, but to sat Anko's curiosity he decided to tell her also, though he knew that she wasn't going to like it. Anko, you know how this village treats him, right? Sarutobi asked and he immediately noticed Anko's present scowl. She kept her rage in check and settled for a strained nod her of head, allowing for Sarutobi to continue. I believe that Naruto-kun went into making weapons because he couldn't get decent materials from those who mistreat him. I have no idea who he even managed to pick up the craft, but he's basically a genius at it, Sarutobi said and Anko blinked. Genius. Now I know he's far from the dead last that I thought he might have been. Hell, he's not even worth being called dead last if you allowed him to live in the Forest of Death. Even I wouldn't do that, Anko countered. Get a small sigh from Hiruzen. I know. Even now I think this is a lapse in judgment, but it was the best idea at the time. I hadn't even considered it. Naruto-kun was the one who did, and he carefully provided reasons as to why this was not only best for him, but for the village as a whole. Needless to say, but I couldn't find a fault with it, and it shows that he can keep to himself. Anko, the way he makes his weapons, they surpass those of the current weaponsmiths, Sarutobi said, but Anko didn't seem very surprised. She had tried to remain neutral to it all, but Sarutobi's experienced eyes could see the confusion in her eyes. During the council meeting, Naruto told me that he had discovered a new type of raw metal known as uzuin. He said that it is called that because it is found near whirlpools in its raw form. The council tried to petition Naruto to build weapons for them, but Naruto obviously takes his craft very seriously. He told them the prices and this got less than happy results. However high the cost is, I can't deny that people will get their money's worth out of the weapon. From the Fuma shuriken that I had seen, it was more durable, more deadly, and capable than any shuriken that our weaponsmiths could make, Sarutobi said and Anko nodded. But that would put him like, with Exodus metals, wouldn't it? Anko asked and Sarutobi shook his head. I wouldn't go that far. Naruto-kun says that he hasn't been doing it that long to be able to even begin to try and duplicate their work, but I'm sure that if Exodus metals ever took a glance at Naruto's work, they would hire him on the spot, but I can't allow it. He's a shinobi now and his first priority is the safety of the village. Hiruzen finished crossing his fingers into each other and he narrowed his eyes when he heard Anko's huff. Yeah, protect the village that is the cause of your pain and suffering. I wouldn't be surprised if he did just up and quit then leave, Anko said more to herself, but Sarutobi took it seriously. Although somewhere in Anko's mind, the idea of Naruto ever actually leave had unsettled her. She didn't know why. Well, whatever. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Sorry for disturbing you, Anko said, and while Hiruzen wanted to talk some more, he didn't push any more issues and just allowed Anko to leave. Anko bowed her head before closing the door to the room. Sarutobi sighed as silence covered the entire room. He looked out into the direction that the forest of death was in and closed his eyes, silently praying that everything would go well for Naruto for some reason. Naruto's house, basement. Sparks flew off in front of Naruto's cold eyes as his hands worked tediously at what he was holding. The blonde narrowed his eyes before he turned his head and he noticed a large flame furnace with fire and a large piece of metal inside of the furnace. Since having Anko leave, Naruto had rolled up his sleeves and went into his work clothes. Before their last D-rank mission had ended, Kakashi had told them all that they were to meet up at Training Ground 7 at 9 o'clock. It was currently 10 o'clock for Naruto. He had another 2 hours before his sensei would arrive, so he took it upon himself, and the foolishness of his sensei, to work on another project that had taken him more than quite a few months to try and accomplish. This wasn't like his Fuma Shuriken that he, and his kits, could get done in 2 days. No, this had to be more precise. Naruto felt the flames in the furnace diminish and he quickly spoke. Rinko, raise the temperature of your fire by 10 degrees. Tuka, once it reaches there, then give a short burst of water, Naruto ordered. Around the room Rinko and Tuka yipped as Rinko opened her mouth and a fire escaped from it. It went into the furnace, igniting it some more to the degrees that Naruto wanted. Once that was done, Tuka took her turn and blasted water into it, allow for steam to escape and enter the air. Sweat dripped from Naruto's face as he was currently holding scissors. He made precious snips to some leather gloves for a small opening. Fu, harden your tail, Naruto said, and Fu yipped as the black, male fox raised its tail in the air. He channeled his chakra around it and Naruto nodded. Fu went and slammed the chakra-enhanced tail to a piece of Uzuin to the corner of the room, getting it to shatter. Naruto had taken it upon himself, over the years, to teach his kits how to use chakra like the Inuzuka dogs. They were still quite off with it, but they made up for it with their stamina. They were all hard workers and none complained when Naruto trained them. It was all for the sake of their father that they endured it all with him. They were happy to be this helpful. It had been at 11 that Naruto had allowed them to enter his basement. He was so proud of them. Fu opened his mouth and took a small piece of Uzuin and brought it to Naruto. The blonde knelt down to take it and patted Fu's head softly before he took out a kunai and sliced a small bit of rock. Naruto gazed at it for a little bit before tossing it into the air. The kits and Naruto watched as the stone hit the ceiling and landed back to the ground without so much as a broken piece of it gone. Naruto nodded and picked it up. Good, nice and sturdy in this raw form, Naruto mumbled, and he opened a book of sealing that was next to him. His eyes trailed along an advanced formula and he went back to work. After nearly an hour of tedious work, Naruto finally clipped a piece of string to the leather gloves and closed up the opening. He sat back and shook his head lightly. He could still feel the heat burning the metal from the furnace in front of him, and he knew that now, the easy part was finished. Naruto turned his head and looked at the clock to notice that Kakashi would be with his team in about another half an hour. Just in time for him to arrive, Naruto said, getting up. His kits turned to him and Naruto opened the door. Come on, you three. You know the drill. That metal now has to sit in the fire for 7 hours and then we take it out. For now we'll just leave a Kaden Bunshin to monitor it in our absence, Naruto said as he summoned a clone. His kits nodded and ran up the stairs from the basement to the hallway and then from the hallway to the upstairs to go and take a shower. Watch the metal carefully. We're nearing the finishing stages of the project, Naruto said, and the clone dutifully bowed before closing the door. Naruto quickly took a short shower, washed his face, brushed his teeth, again, threw off his work clothes and placed on his regular training clothes, then his headband. He sighed to himself before shaking his head as Tuka, Rinko and Fu had finished drying their fur and took their places on his body. Naruto grabbed his scrolls, kunai and shuriken sets, and lastly his ID license. Couldn't forget that shit. Naruto opened the door, heard the sounds of various animals across the forest and ran off to meet with his team. Fools they might be, but he wasn't going to be the foolish one and arrive later than their sensei. That would just be disgraceful. Training Ground 7. Sakura and Sasuke growled before the former yawned tiredly. Their sensei told them to meet 2 hours ago and they had arrived dutifully, but now he was just being an about it. Add to the fact that their other teammate hadn't even arrived yet and it just began to piss them off even more. However, both were surprised as they saw Naruto land on the ground in front of him reading his orange book. Yurla. Sakura didn't get far as Naruto slapped a silence seal over her mouth. He activated it and carefully leaned against the railing. Sakura widened her eyes and her muffled screams of indecency could be heard by Sasuke and Naruto. Sasuke glared at Naruto, but the blonde took no notice. Oh, he knew that the Uchiha was glaring at him, but he wouldn't give in to a fool's advances. Yo! Sasuke and Sakura looked up to see Kakashi over the railing of the fence behind them. MMMPH. Sakura mumbled and Kakashi narrowed his visible eye before sighing. He released the seal on Sakura's mouth and ripped off the paper granting her free speech again. Naruto, why the hell did you do that? Sakura shouted, launching a fist at him. Naruto tilted his head and avoided the strike before he surprised Kakashi as he raised his hand and slapped Sakura across the face, sending her to the ground as she widened her eyes at the redness of her cheeks. Naruto, what was the reason for that? Kakashi asked and Naruto didn't answer. The blonde spun on his heel and hopped over the fence while Sasuke looked down at Sakura. He then snorted and followed after Naruto while Kakashi helped Sakura to her feet and over the fence. The training ground was far and the morning mist that usually permeated the area was soon leaving. As the four walked into the training ground, Kakashi grabbed Naruto's shoulder, getting the blonde to stop. Naruto, I know that if Sakura had hit you then she would have been in the wrong, but that doesn't excuse you for assaulting her the way you did, Kakashi said, and Naruto closed his eyes. He turned around and slowly dropped his book. Kakashi was greeted to the sight of impassive eyes looking at him while the blonde decided to elaborate his actions. What would you have done if she had hit me? Naruto asked and Kakashi blinked. Now that he thought about it, he might not have done anything since it was probably in Sakura's sort of violent nature to be that way. Seeing no answer to his question, Naruto continued. As I figured, Hatake. You would have stood there with that dumb eye smile of yours as she hit me. You then probably would have said something along these lines, Mama Sakura, don't do that, Naruto said, and getting a frown from Kakashi. You tell Haruno that she can take her foolish bullshit somewhere else. I am no one's punching bag. Never again. Never, ever again. If you throw a punch then you had better expect retaliation. She's just lucky that I didn't bust that mouth of hers in the process. Now then, why don't you bring us together and train us like you're supposed to? Naruto said, and Kakashi just stared at Naruto. He was contemplating how to deal with such things said to him, and Kakashi knew that he could take this before the Hokage, but as a Jonin sensei, he couldn't leave all matters to his Hokage on account of his genin. This was supposed to be his job. Naruto, whether or not I did something, there is a time and place for everything. I will overlook it this time because Sakura went at you first and you were right, but this happens again then I will take action, Kakashi said, and Naruto glanced towards him. Better watch that tone, Hatake. When I make promises, deals or threats I will follow through with them. No matter what, Naruto said as he turned back around. Kakashi didn't show any signs that Naruto's words had affected him in the slightest, but they indeed had, and, in a small part of his mind, Kakashi felt that Naruto would be more than happy to make that threat promise a reality. Sighing to himself, Kakashi brought his genin together and instructed them that they would be doing several other D-rank missions and to end the day they would be doing teamwork exercises. This got a groan from Sasuke and Sakura, but nothing from Naruto. Walking dogs, grocery shopping, returning library books, babysitting the orphans at the orphanage, racking leaves, cleaning a restaurant, and one more painting of a fence. All these D-rank missions Team 7 had accomplished, and their pay was in the midst of being transferred to their accounts. Naruto, of course, didn't need this money for any purpose. If anything, he just stored it in his house's vault and let it accumulate. Maybe it would have some purpose in the future. For an orphan, then foster child, then loner like Naruto, he knew to appreciate what he had been given, unlike Sakura, who took it for granted. During all the D-rank missions, Naruto continued to read his orange book, and he was just getting to the ending. He would never allow himself to giggle perversely, like his sensei had always done, so he only gave a smirk when something good happened. His eyebrows would rise to show astonishment and surprise to something he hadn't seen coming. Seeing such a perverted book, Sakura had growled and glared daggers at the blonde on numerous occasions to try and get him to stop reading such smut, but she didn't voice that opinion. No, Sakura had, for once, kept her mouth shut. She didn't feel like getting hit again, realizing just how much harder Naruto's slaps were in comparison to her punches. Sakura had hoped that Sasuke would come to her defense since she liked him, but Sasuke had continued to ignore her and her pleas since they were beneath him. Arriving back to the training ground at around 3 o'clock, Kakashi closed his book and smiled. "Well then, now I guess I'll be teaching you something, won't I?" Kakashi asked, and Sasuke grinned while Sakura nodded. Naruto didn't care as he closed his book as well. Everyone waited for their sensei to begin as Kakashi rubbed the back of his head and tried to think of something. Naruto narrowed his eyes and gave a light snort. So he was foolish enough to not even know what to train us in. Pathetic Hatake, Naruto thought before Kakashi gave an eye smile and clapped his hand. "Oh yeah, alright then. You're all about to glare me into a hole, so I will ask this. What is chakra?" Kakashi asked, and Naruto resisted the urge to just find Kyuubi, rip the seal off, and just hope that the demon fox would devour his sensei for stupidity. "It's the ability for those of us as Genin, Chunin, Jonin, Anbu, and even Hokage-sama, to perform jutsu," Sakura said wisely, getting a nod from Kakashi. "And what else?" Kakashi asked, getting looks of confusion from Sakura and Sasuke. Naruto closed his book loudly, getting everyone attention. "It is basically the lifeblood of shinobi. It is acquired through rigorous training for us to use past just perform jutsu. It allows us to heighten our senses, abilities, and movements. It's the combination of physical and spiritual energy to be melded together in the stomach, or lower abdomen," Naruto said, getting a smile from Kakashi. "Very good, Naruto. That's exactly what it is," Kakashi said. Sasuke snorted as he didn't answer anything, and Sakura fumed at being shown up by a presumed dead last of the academy. She knew his grades. How the hell was he smarter than her? It was so stupid. He was making himself seem smart so she would like him instead of Sasuke. Well, it wouldn't work. Not at all. I suppose I want you all to get started on some chakra control exercises. I wanted to teach a bit of teamwork, but a shinobi is more than a team. He needs individual skills. Otherwise, how can you find a good partner? Kakashi asked, and Sakura blushed as she imagined herself and her crush kissing, then becoming partners. Sasuke would use her talents for his goals, and she would be much closer to him in return. For Naruto, this was nothing new, as the Sandaime had spoken with him about it. "So what are we going to do? Who cares about control as long as you perform the jutsu?" Sasuke asked, and Kakashi shook his head. "No, you must master the basics first, and the first basic here is..." Kakashi stopped midway and approached a tree. He carefully walked up it, getting surprise from Sakura and Sasuke, but only annoyance from Naruto. He hung upside down from a branch and smiled. "This is tree climbing. You must focus a fixed amount of chakra to your feet and use that to climb a tree without using your hands. If the flow of chakra is too weak, then you will lose your footing on the tree and fall off. If it's too strong, then you will be pushed away from the tree, causing the tree to break around the point of contact, and you will fall. If you can master this technique, then you can master any jutsu, Kakashi said, getting a glare from Sasuke, a smile from Sakura, and a roll of the eyes from Naruto. Use your kunai to mark your progress and continue from there. If you can get that, then we can move on to the next exercise, Kakashi said with an eye smile. He hopped down and gave a kunai to Sasuke and Sakura, which they took. He then handed one to Naruto, and the blonde glared at the medal. Time seemed to stop as he looked at it before he looked up at Kakashi, who still had his eye smile. Naruto closed his eyes, sighed, and took the kunai from Kakashi as he nodded. You can start, he said as Sakura and Sasuke ran for the tree. Sasuke didn't get far before he backflipped off the bark and landed on the ground. Oh wow, this is so easy. It's incredible, Sakura said as Sasuke looked up to see Sakura already at a branch waving at him. I did it, Sasuke-kun, Sakura shouted, but Sasuke just scowled and turned his head away to mask his frustration that someone weaker than him had actually gotten it on the first try. Well, it looks like the female has the most chakra control. Nice work, Sakura, Kakashi said, and Sakura nodded. That's only because of the fool's pathetic reserves. Hitaki, you should be admonishing her, not praising her. Only when she can get this far should she be boasting about anything. Everyone looked up and Kakashi sighed while Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Sakura gaped as Naruto was at the very top of the tree next to hers. How does the Dobi know this shit before I do? I'm a Uchiha. I'm an elite. Why does he and even Sakura know this? Sasuke thought to himself as Naruto jumped down to the ground. He placed his hands in his pockets and shook his head. It's shit like this that you should teach in the academy. It's also why these little tests of yours have a 66% failure rating, Naruto said, and Kakashi couldn't deny that. The academy was a lot more lax than in the times of war. It was a lot harder, a lot crueler, and a lot stronger. If you couldn't balance kunai on your fingertips for an exercise, then you weren't graduating. Sakura frowned as her accomplishment was diminished to a worthless effort before Naruto opened his jacket. However, since she has so little reserves, then she's the one who can improve the most. Females naturally have better chakra control than males, Naruto said, and Sakura's attitude raised again at Naruto, saying that she could improve. For Naruto, he knew what it was like to be brought down by words, and if he did the same for Sakura, then he, himself, was a fool as well. Those who berate without giving a chance to acknowledge efforts were fools as well. Well said, Naruto. Then you wouldn't mind teaching them the tree climbing exercise, Kakashi said, and Naruto glared at the Jonin before snorting. Whatever, he said, and Kakashi nodded. Truth was, he had to meet with the Hokage for a moment and then be right back. He wasn't running off to ditch their training, this time. Seeing that they were alone, Naruto patted his legs and quickly Rinko, Tuka, and Fu dropped to the ground. These are my kits. They are better at this exercise than the both of you. If you can't beat them to the top, then you haven't mastered the exercise. Fu, race Sasuke. Tuka, race Sakura. Rinko, show me what you've been working on, Naruto instructed, and the three foxes nodded. You're just a flea-bitten mongrel. You couldn't be better at this exercise than I could, Sasuke said, and Sakura smiled at Tuka. Please take care of me, she said too, in her opinion, the cute fox. Tuka glared at Sakura as she hadn't forgotten what the female had tried to do to her father. Sasuke and Fu ran up the tree, and instantly Sasuke gasped as Fu sped past him and reached the top of the tree easily. Sasuke didn't even get that far before he fell to the ground. Tuka and Sakura tried it as well, but that ended out in Toka's victory. The female fox never liked her racing partner anyway. Sasuke and Sakura were left slack-jawed while they turned to glare at Naruto, only to be surprised at Rinko launched a fire at a tree, burning it slightly. Naruto nodded with a pleased smile and patted Rinko's head. Very good, Rinko. Your control has improved. Now then, I want you to try water walking along with Tuka and Fu. It's obvious that you're still too good for Sasuke and Sakura, Naruto said, and Rinko nodded as she raced back to Fu and Tuka. Sasuke and Sakura heard the yips of conversation between the three foxes before they raced towards the vacant lake to the left. As they did that, Naruto began to instruct Sasuke and Sakura on the exercise. Both were going to hate Naruto, but if the blonde was to be put in charge of their training, then they would train under his watch. You no Kuni. In You no Kuni, there were multiple happy people over the area. You no Kuni was normally quite an attractive town as nothing ever really went down there, but that was all because of the weapons magnate, Exodus Metals. It was the largest building across You no Kuni. It was also greatly wealthy and influential. Many people had often applied to work there as the pay was great and the work was fair, but tough. However, not just anyone could work in Exodus Metals. There was a reason why it had been able to get You no Kuni out of the debt that it had to a few countries. Because of that, Exodus Metals was a standing monument for You no Kuni. No one ever knew who the owner of such a corporation was, but not many of them actually cared. Exodus Metals had financed so many places with power, work, and food that it was like a prayer answered from Kami. The next thing about it was that people had heard about the so-called war between Exodus Metals Company and Gato Shipping. No one knew the big details as they were kept low, but people had heard that Gato Shipping had, in essence, killed the Exodus Metals influence in Wave and claimed it for his own. No one wanted to know how Exodus Metals would react. In the large corporation, in a single work office, a woman with long green hair growled as she huffed and slapped papers on the table. "God damn it," she said, getting up to her feet. She wore a green tank top shirt and dark jeans. She wore her open-toed sandals that were able to wrap around her ankles as she got up and walked out. "What are the current revenues after Gato's backwater assault?" she asked, shouted, and the attendant near her gulped. "It hasn't put a dent to us as we far expected, but we were almost done with Wave's reconstruction before this happened." "You did get Naruto-sama's message, right, Kisa-sama?" he asked, and the woman named Kisa nodded. Kisa was not a happy woman. Ever since they Exodus Metals managed, with the people's favor, to take out its corrupt daimyo, Exodus Metals had been declared something of a ruler for You no Kuni. They had the people's trust and their vote for things to go well. So Kisa was, in essence, the daimyo for You no Kuni. She was to be basically a collaboration worker with Exodus Metals for You no Kuni's benefit, but she was a worker for You no Kuni before she was the daimyo. This place had saved her life and she wouldn't allow someone as sleazy as Gato to try and undermine it. Yes, he gave us his message. We had tried to deal with it when they had first instigated us, but that went south fast. Sometimes I wonder what goes on through his head, Kisa said as she leaned against the railing. She could see various blacksmiths and weaponsmiths working to construct weapons as they wanted within the parameters of Exodus Metals conditions. It was a business after all. They would generally receive over 15 applicants a day of people who were hoping to join. Naruto had left the company to her as its figurehead for the most part. Kisa and Naruto had quite a long partnership. One that she wouldn't dare to talk about it. It was embarrassing for her. But Kisa-sama, if I might ask, why is it so urgent that Uzumaki-sama needs to hide his identity from the masses of the world, and even then that he's so impassive about what Gato did to Wave? Shouldn't he be like super pissed? The attendant asked, and Kisa chuckled to herself. I won't fault you for thinking that, but the brat doesn't get pissed. If he's pissed, then you'd better back off. I think he's seeming impassive about it because he plans to go there himself to deal with Gato. There are little things that will ever make him mad, but he cares so much more about his workers than anyone I've seen. To lose such people, who had followed him no less, is in grave sin in his eyes, Kisa said, getting the attendant to gulp. To the other question, it's not really Wave that he's after. He's helping it to be financially stable, but our influence has greatly diminished due to Gato. It's two things that he's after. One is Gato's company. Kisa stopped and took pleasure in the attendant's widened eyes before continuing. The second is the place north of Wave, Kisa said with a sadistic grin on her face that made the attendant shiver. 3 weeks later. Target in sight. It appears to have settled down, Sasuke spoke into his mic. I see it as well. Ready to move on your signal, Naruto spoke as well. I have it as well. Ready to go, Sakura said, though Naruto could hear the hesitance in her voice. Kakashi sighed and placed his fingers to his mic. Confirm red ribbon, Kakashi said, and Naruto carefully held up a small mirror. He looked at the reflection of the target and did indeed see the red ribbon on its ear. The blonde narrowed his eyes before nodding. Confirmation complete. This is the right one, Naruto said, and Kakashi nodded. All right then, let's do this and get it chalked up for another mission to be done. Ready? Go. Kakashi shouted as Sasuke and Sakura lunged for the target. Both scrambled for a cat as it scratched Sakura's face. Sakura yelped and threw the cat into the air before it landed into Naruto's arms. The blonde shook his head and gently scratched the cat's ears, getting it to purr and fall into his arms in bliss. Tora, the Hellcat, has been subdued. Missions complete, Naruto said in a monotone voice, showing that he had no interest in this. Sasuke snorted and Sakura growled at the cat that was purring in Naruto's arms. They had been trying to rush down the cat for a good 2 or 3 hours. It had just been another D-rank mission for them that they had on their record, and one that they hadn't been pleased with. Sasuke and Sakura, under Naruto's instruction, had mastered the tree walking exercise, and Kakashi had them right back to teamwork exercises. He had stressed the importance of it being the key to a shinobi's success, to which Naruto only thought was half bull and half truth. The blonde knew the importance of teamwork, but it wasn't always enough. Individual skills also had to be expounded upon. Rinko, Tuka and Fu had easily taken to water walking as they had increased their reserves. Their reserves were as much as Sasuke's, which, saying that they were foxes was quite the accomplishment. Also they had, much to Naruto's pleasantly surprised face, come up with a few collaboration attacks of their own. They had also used their talents with Naruto to finish the blonde's latest and longest project. It had been a long and tiring process for them all, but Naruto was glad to have it done. Naruto, himself, managed to learn 2 new jutsu and put them under his belt. They weren't much in the way of attack and defense, but just for backup purposes if anyone needed it. In that time, Anko had never gone back to his house and Naruto hadn't been seeking her out either. He had reasoned that she was busy and didn't always have the time to be a pain in his. It allowed him just a little peace of mind. Very good, you guys. Now then, let's take it back to them so that we can declare this mission a success, Kakashi said, and everyone nodded their heads as they walked away. In the mission room, Sasuke and Sakura smirked victoriously as the cat, Tora, got its life squeezed out of it by the daimyo's wife. She really strangled it, and at seeing such a thing, Rinko, Tuka and Fu winced before they clung to Naruto a little more possessively. They hoped that they wouldn't be hugged like that. Oh, thank you for finding my lovely Tora. I don't know what I would do if I couldn't find her, she said, and the shinobi bowed before she took Tora away with a happy mood on her face. Seeing that this would more than likely happen again, but for now having it done with, Naruto read the last pages to the first Ika and then pulled out a drama book for himself. Sometimes nothing but scene after scene made book sort of dull. Congratulations on your mission, Team 7. Now let's see, you have cleaning the park, placing up ads for the local bookstore, chaperoning the kids at the academy, or... No. Everyone turned and they noticed Sasuke snarling. The Uchiha had enough of this shit. Sakura was surprised by Sasuke's outburst and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Kakashi sighed while Sasuke shook his head. 3 weeks of this shit is enough. I'm not going to get stronger doing these damn chores that you call missions. Give us something better, Sasuke said to the Sandaime and Iruka, who were looking at each other. Iruka stood to his feet and glared at Sasuke. Watch your tone, Genin. There is an order to everything that needs to be done. Everyone's had to do these missions before. You are no different. This is to familiarize yourself with each other so that contact and teamwork can be established in the field. You need to remember your respect before the Hokage, Iruka scolded and Sakura was more than ready to defend her crush before Kakashi sighed. Hokage-sama. Naruto's unexpected voice brought everyone's attention to him, but the only thing they could all see was his face covered by his book that he was reading. Yes, Naruto-kun. Sarutobi asked, a little disheartened that the blonde's attitude had been the same. One of so much respect, but at the same time still being impassive to the very end. How many missions has Team 7 accumulated? Naruto asked, and Sarutobi held up a file and opened it. You have all completed 20 D rank missions, added to the 5 that you did today, then 25, Sarutobi said, and Naruto nodded. I believe that in the Shinobi Guide it states, once a team, no matter its members, has completed an appropriate 25 or more D rank missions, then they are eligible to a C rank mission, Naruto said, finishing. Sasuke and Sakura widened their eyes while Kakashi sighed. This would just mean more work for him, and the lazy Jonin really didn't want such a thing. Iruka smiled at Naruto's knowledge, but the glare that the blonde casted sort of made him shiver. That somewhere down the line he had failed Naruto, and so had the academy. Kakashi, what do you think? Are they ready for a C rank mission? Sarutobi asked, and Kakashi sighed. Well, they have all improved. I suppose a chance to get out of the village would do us good. I believe we're ready, Kakashi said, and Sarutobi nodded his head. Iruka just sat down and grumbled about disrespectful genin in these days or something like that. Very well then. We can give you joint C rank mission. This will be an escort mission to Cha no Kuni, T country. You will be partnering up with Team Guy for this mission. The person you will be escorting is the daimyo's daughter who had come to visit Konoha 3 weeks ago. I'm sure that there might be a few bandits, but other than that you should be fine. You are to meet up at the gates in 3 hours, Sarutobi said, and everyone nodded while Kakashi's sweat dropped. Oh dear Kami. Why that team? Kakashi thought to himself before Team 7 left the room. Everyone was confused by their sensei's expression, which was very grave. For Naruto, his face was like he had seen the freakin' Slenderman and lived to tell the tale about it. Not that Naruto believed such shit anyway. Stupid books about stupid myths. Alright then, let's all get ready and meet up at the gates. You three are going to be in for such a surprise when we get to the gates. Now then, don't be late and pack enough for the week. It's quite a walk towards Cha no Kuni, Kakashi said, and everyone nodded before they quickly went their separate ways. Naruto, after having hanged, and brought some groceries from the local market as well as the new releases to some novels, he made his way towards his house in the Forest of Death. Naruto dropped to the ground and opened the door to his house. He didn't get far as a kunai shot at him. Naruto simply ducked under it and continued inside. He dropped his bags to the ground before glaring up. He turned and noticed 2 Anbu his height in the room. Misa, Sai, what do you want? Naruto asked, and the Sai Anbu took off his mask, showing his pale, almost expressionless face. Nice to see you, Naruto-senpai, again. Sai and Naruto paused as he tried to put his things into the refrigerator. I'm not your senpai, Sai-san. In order for me to be your senpai, I'd have to be with Root. I'm not, therefore I'm not your senpai. Also, why is Misa with you? Naruto asked. Danzo-sama had me take her to see you, Sai said, and Misa stepped forward. Naruto-sama, Danzo-sama has petitioned you to make weapons for Root, Misa said as toneless as she could, but Naruto could hear the small feminine tone in it. That news had caught him off guard, to say the least. Naruto normally wasn't one to be caught off guard by anything, but dealing with Danzo for quite a while, the blonde still didn't know how the old warhawk thought. Danzo was as much an enigma to Naruto as Naruto was an enigma to Danzo. Neither could fully comprehend the other. That's what made Danzo so interesting to Naruto, that the blonde had to be a partner to him. Danzo would indirectly train Naruto by offering him scrolls, and Naruto would work with Root from time to time, like a messenger or shorthand of sorts. I see. Well, Danzo's no fool. He knows my work fee. I'm going to need, Naruto said before Sai placed a bag on the table. Half of the money and the other half upon completion, but from Danzo you have said that you will work for jutsu, so he has offered you 3 B rank techniques, and 1 C rank jutsu, Sai said, and Naruto glanced to them. 2 wind techniques, a water technique and a fire technique. A fair price. Very well. I know how many of you there are en route. Expect your supplies within the month, Naruto said, and Sai bowed his head. Misa did as well, but she wasn't finished. Naruto-sama, Danzo-sama has also asked you if you would be willing to have an assistant besides your kits. Someone to help you around more, Misa said, but Naruto shook his head. I require no help. Thanks for asking anyway. You two may go now. I suppose it was pleasant to see you, Naruto said, and before he even finished placing his things away, he felt the two leave his house as quickly as they might have came. With his fridge fully stocked, Naruto closed the door and took the scrolls into his hands and opened them. B rank Sweden. Hanran Bansho B rank Kaden. Dienden C rank Futon. Yuha Sho and B rank Futon. Atsugai. Naruto read through the entire list of each individual jutsu and closed the scrolls. He rubbed his neck and sighed. It would seem that he would have just a little more to work on while guarding this woman. Collecting the scrolls together, Naruto placed them in his pouch and collected his things for the trip. He placed them in scrolls, and those scrolls were placed into the sides of a black jacket that he was wearing. He grabbed a few Fuma shuriken and his newly made one. He then looked down at his newest project and narrowed his eyes. He just shrugged his shoulders and pocketed those as well. Naruto took one last look at his house before turning off the lights and closing the door. He hoped that things would be rough just a little bit. Naruto wanted to shake things up a little. Naruto arrived at the gates a few minutes from the 3 hours that they were supposed to arrive. As he dropped to the ground, he noticed 3 others along with his teammates. A male Hyuga, a female with bun hair, and a bowl-cut boy in a green jumpsuit. Naruto raised an eyebrow before he snorted and shook his head. Oh, it's Naruto Baka, Sakura said, getting the girl and her teammates to turn to the side. Naruto walked up to them and leaned against the large open gates and continued to read his book. Asu. How do you do? I'm Konoha's green beast. I'm Rock Lee, the boy known as Lee said. Quote. Quote. Lee blinked before he turned to his 2 teammates. The Hyuga and the girl shrugged their shoulders while Lee smiled. Those are my teammates Tenten and Neji. This is your first C-rank mission, right? Awesome. We'll get it done and our flames of youth will shine brightly for our village, Lee said with his tears falling. Sorry. What did you say? Naruto asked, coming to his senses. His kits whimpered at the sight of the energetic young man in front of them. Those clothes, that hair, those eyebrows. Naruto could feel Fu shuddering against his body and shook his head. He only then noticed that Lee seemed to be gawking at him. Damn you and your hip attitude. I see that you are to be my destined rival, since Gai-sensei and Kakashi-san are rivals. I will not lose to you. And if I do, then I will run around Konoha 500 times on my hands, and if I can't do that, Lee went on about his attempts, and each time Naruto gripped his book a little tighter. This guy is as worse as Haruno, Naruto thought before he noticed Lee was bonked across the head. Lee, that's enough out of you. Stop bothering him. Sorry about that. Lee's a little eccentric is all. Can I get your name? Tenten asked. Without lowering his book, Naruto answered. Uzumaki Naruto, Tenten-san. It's Team 7's first C rank, so I guess good luck to you, Naruto said, and he noticed that he didn't get a response. Silence became apparent and the blonde lowered his book to allow himself to see Tenten staring at him. Why, you're Uzumaki Naruto? Tenten asked, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. Great. Another foolish person in this village. It will never end, I guess. It's to be expected since these fools fails to see the true powers of Fuinjutsu. That's right, I am, Naruto said, getting on his guard in case of anything. However, he wasn't prepared as Tenten dropped to her knees and bowed to the ground. Naruto blinked while Neji, Sasuke, Lee and Sakura seemed confused. Why, you're my idol. Please, can I see the weapon? The one that was used against Kakashi-san. It's the talk of the village that you design weapons of a weird design. Please, can I see it? Tenten begged, and Naruto rolled his eyes. The Dobi makes weapons. Sasuke wondered, while Sakura seemed to wonder just what the hell was wrong with the girl in front of her. She should be bowing to Sasuke, not to the idiot. Neji's face scrunched up into a glare, and since he was a Hyuga, his pupil-less eyes made it all the more intimidating or so. Why should I? Naruto asked, folding his arms. Tenten looked up in surprise before she grabbed Naruto's hands. Anyone who makes weapons must pass on their work to their followers. Just a peek? Tenten asked, and Naruto just stared at the girl before he reached into his pouch and tossed out the Fuma Shuriken. He handed it to Tenten, and she gleefully watched it gleam in the sunlight. She managed to click a button and widened her eyes as the 4 swirl blades to the shuriken popped out. Sakura gasped and Sasuke snorted, but truth was that he was impressed with its design as well. Back during the Kakashi fight, Sasuke couldn't get a good look at it, but now it was amazing. If he could master that weapon, then he could get rid of Itachi easily. Sugoi. This is incredible, Naruto-san. I can't see a flaw anywhere. It's even beyond what my dad can create. You could get a job with Exodus Metals. I plan to work there myself. Wouldn't it be cool if we both worked there? Tenten asked, trying to get an excited response from Naruto, but the blonde just seemed disinterested about it all. Whatever, Naruto said, folding his arms. Tenten shrugged her shoulders before gazing back up at the weapon. Her dad had signed up their weapons shop with Exodus Metals, and they would receive and deliver materials between each other. Tenten didn't know the reasons why the other 5 small family business had joined, but they couldn't be bad reasons. Well, all our youthful companions have arrived. That is the feeling of youth. We will tackle this with the best of our ability. Our passionate flames will not die down from this adventure. Isn't that right? Exclamation mark quote. Everyone turned, and Naruto's eyebrow twitched while Fu, Rinko, and Tuka popped their heads out, and they instantly regretted doing so. It was an adult Lee. He wore the same thing that Lee wore, except that he made the outfit look so much worse. Naruto looked down as he noticed Tuka had managed to get underneath his black shirt and huddle close to his chest, away from the scary monster that was Maida Guy. Naruto could feel her shiver, and he wondered if maybe Tuka just wasn't used to those kinds of people. They didn't have a problem with Anko, but then again, Anko's eyebrows never took of about 5% of her face. This guy was just a category of weird that Naruto didn't want to get into. He could in fact feel his IQ dropping from every word this guy said out of his mouth. So this is Maida Guy, the strongest taijutsu user in Konoha. No doubt he's passed that ability on to Lee-san if his outfit is any indication. I just know I'm going to have a headache when this is over, Naruto thought to himself and gave a heavy sigh. Sasuke and Sakura winced at the sight of the man, and Sakura carefully inched her way to Sasuke to try and hide behind him. So you are Kakashi's youthful students. You look like a fine bunch. Let's get this mission done. Guy shouted, and Lee shouted as well. Neji held his head down, and so did Tenten in embarrassment. Naruto shook his head and went back to his book. A few minutes later, Kakashi appeared with his lame excuses as always before everyone noticed a palanquin. Inside was a girl about Naruto's age, along with the palanquin holders or bearers or whatever it was that Naruto couldn't figure out. He just shook his head while the men dropped the large litter to the ground while the woman stepped out. She was your traditional well-to-do rich girl. She wore the fancy robes, had the fancy hair, bowed with a nice grace, and her face was blemishless as usual. Naruto had known why she was here. She wasn't some tourist coming to Konoha. No, she had heard about Exodus Metals through Konoha, and apparently the daimyo of Cha no Kuni was hoping if Konoha would be able to contact the head of Exodus Metals, since Cha no Kuni was out of the way from Yu no Kuni. Exodus Metals had respectfully declined the offer, saying that it wasn't needed for the woman to force herself, so she was going back home fiancé-less. Thank you for your protection. I hope you serve us well during your stay, she said in a melodious voice. Everyone nodded to her, except for one person. She turned to see Naruto reading his book, and she read the title. Wild Storms in the Sunlight Garden, a very rare and expensive book. Only about 10 of those books were ever to be sold. Her father had one and she had read it. She never expected a commoner to have one. Also, maybe she was mistaken or not, but she saw ruffled in his zipped-up jacket. She blinked before she sauntered over to Naruto. I wonder how Naruto will react to royalty, Kakashi thought to himself. Everyone else probably wondered the same as the young woman came up to him. Thank you for offering your services and protection to me. I hope we have a pleasant time, she said. Everyone waited with bated breath for a response, but to their surprise there wasn't one. The only sound that could be heard was the sound of a page turning. See, can he do that? Ignore such a powerful woman? Tenten asked, but no one answered. Neji narrowed his eyes while Lee and Guy seemed confused. Naruto just flipped another page of his book while the young woman leaned up. I'm Kyoko. What might your name be? The young woman asked. Still she got no response. This didn't seem to go well with the palanquin bearers as one of them marched up to the blonde. Kyoko-sama has generously offered her name to you. Answer her, peasant, he said, and Kyoko frowned as did everyone else. Naruto made no indication that he either acknowledged Kyoko's presence or the man's presence, and everyone still waited. Kyoko looked down and she noticed 3 sets of eyes looking at her. They blinked in confusion of her appearance and Kyoko smiled at the 3. Wow, they are so cute. Their fur is also amazing. I wish I could have one, Kyoko said, and Naruto brought his book down to allow his eyes to glare at her. He then sighed. Hitaki, how long until we move out? Naruto asked, finally speaking, and that broke everyone's musings. Kakashi blinked before clearing his throat. Kyoko-sama, we will need you back in the palanquin to proceed. We're a little behind schedule and we should get a move on. Naruto and Tenten will take the front. Sasuke and Neji will take the side. Sakura and Lee will take the other side. Then Guy and I will take up the rear also, just a little further. Naruto, you're our eyes as you have the best sensor capabilities. Use your clones to scout ahead and warn us of trouble, Kakashi instructed. Naruto grunted an acknowledgement as he strolled up to the front with Tenten. Well, he's just Mr. Personality, isn't he? He's like you, Neji, Tenten said, and Neji snorted then grumbled in that order. He took his spot with Sasuke on the left side of the palanquin, as did Sakura and Lee, though Sakura had reservations as Lee winked at her, getting shivers down her spine. Kyoko-sama, the palanquin, one of the men said, and Kyoko shook her head left and right. No, I won't ride unless I can ride with one of those adorable foxes in my lap, she whined, and people groaned as they glanced to Naruto, hoping that the blonde would agree. The foxes quickly hid themselves from view and scrunched up close to their father figure. Naruto, don't you think that you should comply? Tenten asked. Naruto said nothing. If someone asked for a parent to give them their child, would they? Naruto didn't know about other parents, but for him it was a hell no. They were his kids. He would just comply, wait for her to get fed up with waiting like the little fool she was, get in the palanquin and have them complete their mission. It was a long 5 minutes of silence, but everyone could see that either Naruto wasn't paying attention, he wasn't going to hand them over, or he was just being selfish. Sakura growled and marched up to Naruto. Naruto, give the daimyo's daughter one of your foxes. It's not like she's going to keep them, so just give her one of the mongrels. Sakura said, and Naruto took in a deep breath of air and exhaled. Remember your place, Haruno. It's back next to Lee-san. I suggest that you get over there if you know what's good for you, Naruto warned, but Sakura persisted. Guys, Tenten said, and everyone was watching the scene in front of them with interest. Kakashi took an unconscious step forward. Something told him that this might end very badly, with Sakura being on worse terms with Naruto than she already was. Damn it, they are just dumb animals. If she wants one, then you hand one to her. Sakura said and reached her hands forward. She just got inches within Naruto's torso before everyone blinked. Naruto grabbed Sakura's and quickly squeezed it, sending her to the ground. Sakura winced painfully at the touch of Naruto's hands and she was sure that she could hear a small bone snap. Naruto, that's enough. Let Sakura go. Kakashi ordered and Naruto let Sakura kneel on the ground some more in a way that forced her to look into his eyes. Don't you ever touch my kids. Naruto snarled and Sakura shivered as she felt her mouth stop working. I will never entrust their lives with someone that I don't know. I could give a damn who she is or what family she comes from. You try and touch them again and there won't be an arm for you to try and reach for them again, Naruto said before he threw Sakura's arm away and resumed his post. Sakura turned and saw the hand print from Naruto's touch on her skin. She shivered before Kakashi helped her up. He shot Naruto a look, and the blonde knew that he did, but he ignored it. Seeing that the scene was over, one of the men cleared his throat. Kyoko-sama, if you don't mind now. It seems that the young man isn't going to relent, he said and Kyoko nodded wisely. She glanced back at Naruto for a bit and she was sure that he gave her a corner of his eye that dared her to even try something like Sakura had. Very well, let's go. I couldn't get them today. Maybe tomorrow, she said. Naruto snorted and he unzipped the upper half of his jacket to see Rinko and Fu yipping at him. He then went to the next layer, his shirt, and opened it to see Tuka furled up and sleeping calmly next to her father's warm stomach like she always did. Sorry you had to see me like that, Naruto said and the foxes just smiled as Fu and Rinko curled into each other and slept. Naruto zipped up his chest and felt a hand on his shoulder. Naruto, are you alright now? Tenten asked and Naruto closed his eyes. I'm fine Tenten-san. Forgive my actions. I foolishly let my anger get the better of me. I need more training, Naruto said and Tenten shook her head. No problem. I can see that they mean a lot to you. I think you were kinda cool, Tenten complimented and Naruto just grunted. Cool huh? No one's ever called me that. There might just be a future for you Tenten-san, Naruto thought to himself with a small inner smile. Pretty soon everyone walked out of the gates and into the forest. For Sakura it was a big deal to finally be out of the village. As for Sasuke, it was just nice to finally have a higher mission, one where he would get stronger and then prove himself before his brother as he was an avenger. For Naruto, this was nothing new. He had done all of this before when he had first left Konoha by himself. Nay Kakashi-sensei, does Cha no Kuni have any shinobi? Sakura asked. Naruto would have thrown a rock at her for that question, but he had resisted. He did enough to her as it was in letting his emotions get the better of him. He really had to rein that it. It would mean the death of him if he ever reacted that fierce to anything. No Sakura. Cha no Kuni doesn't have shinobi. It's just a small country south of Konoha. They don't have a military force and so they come to the major hidden villages or minor villages and give us missions to do things for them. It's how the economy works. So if you're expecting to run into shinobi or kunoichi then you won't have to worry. As Hokage-sama said, a few bandits or nothing else, Kakashi said and Sakura nodded with a sigh of her lips. She was, secretly, relieved that they wouldn't be running into trouble, but Sasuke scowled at such words. Time ran its course as people continued through their various things. Lee was trying to get Sakura on a date, much to her chagrin. Neji and Sasuke were saying nothing and brooding. Guy was trying to challenge an unwilling Kakashi to a fight or something, the palanquin bearers huffing to carry Kyoko across the dirt road and a frowning Kyoko at not getting to play with one of Naruto's kits. Meanwhile, Tenten was trying to strike up a conversation with Naruto, but the blonde never gave many responses. He seemed uninterested. Wow, so you've been in the weapon-making business for 6 years. That's amazing. I've only started doing it about 2 years ago. I can't even make things of what you showed me. I did make something, would you like to see? Tenten asked. Naruto glanced towards her and rolled his eyes at the girl's attempts, but at least she wasn't being some foolish bitch or ignorant woman so he just allowed her to do so. Tenten went into her pouch and held out 3 kunai. All three were the same length and they seemed to be made out of the same metal as those from Konoha that they used originally. See critique please. Tenten asked and Naruto grabbed one. He flipped it around in his hands and then placed it on his arms. He gave a quick slice and watched small traces of blood flow out. The blonde Jinchuriki nodded before giving the kunai back. They need work, Naruto said and Tenten widened her eyes before she smiled sadly. Yeah, I guess they would. Thanks for being honest, she said and Naruto glanced to her. Aw damn women in there. I really would like just a little praise for my work, methods. Naruto sighed and took a kunai. The metal that you've used is very durable and your originality is really showing. The curving point of the kunai is the focal point to where you concentrated the heat. You thought that if you sent the heat to the lower portion then the upper portion wouldn't melt and it would be ineffective and the melting metal would shape weird. Also it's heavy. That's not a bad thing, but for being kunai then they would dip when thrown in the wind due to resistance. What temperature did you have and what metal? Naruto asked. I believe I had it to 300 degrees and I used a portion of steel, an inch of diamond and osmium, Tenten said and Naruto closed his eyes. He took a small huff and shook his head. Your first mistake was the choice of metals. Steel and osmium do not go well together. The density of osmium will overtake the density of steel since it has a better durability. Second mistake is that diamond burns well into the 4892 degrees where you shouldn't even be staying in the room without an air conditioner to regulate that temperature and have personal equipment. I see the specks of diamond in your kunai and you should know that diamond doesn't melt. Adding pressure to it will increase density, but that's all you get. Your temp was way too low and your choice of melts are inappropriate, Naruto scolded with a slight bonk to Tenten's head. She nodded and apologized. So, what should I do? Tenten asked. Figure it out. You're supposed to be a weapons mistress. You should understand how a weapon feels, Naruto said and Tenten just nodded as they continued to walk through the dirt road. As they walked, Naruto shifted and he quickly stopped. Stop, he said and people stopped immediately. Naruto, what is it? Kakashi asked and Naruto glared forward. One of my clones dispelled. I couldn't even get a good look at who did it before it was too late. Whoever it is, they got me by surprise. Which is no small feat, Naruto said with the last part to himself. Everyone tensed as Kakashi and Guy took point. Everyone proceed cautiously now. We're going in, Kakashi said and everyone nodded as they tensed and walked. The bearers were tense and the footsteps were slowly coming to a stop. Kakashi and Guy looked left and right, but saw no sight of anyone. Neji scoped the area, Guy commanded. Neji nodded and held up 2 fingers. Byakugan, Neji shouted and Naruto looked around. He could hear his kits growling telling him that someone was nearby and that they really knew how to hide. The blonde looked left and right as did everyone else. Sakura tensed while Sasuke held a kunai. Lee moved his eyes fast left and right while Tenten took out a kunai. So these are the people that he sent to protect Yukioko-sama. Well, I feel special, someone said as they quickly came into view. They were easily male and female. The female wore a revealing red outfit, showing her midriff, arms and legs, with her white hair tied back by a multicolored rope with bells attached to it. She had multiple tattoos that resembled flower petals on the left side of her face and midriff as well as her left leg. She also wore red high-heeled sandals. She came in rolling with the mist as did her partner. The male was a hulking figure with red-orange, spiky hair. He wore a sleeveless blue shirt that was tucked into his dark gray pants, which, in turn, were tucked into military-style boots. The pants were held up by a red belt, which matched a strap going across his chest from his right shoulder to under his left arm. Kakashi and Guy quickly readied themselves, but they weren't ready for the large number of bandits that were behind them. Why Guy said while the woman smiled. I'm surprised you remember Guy. It's been a long time. After all, I was planning to partner with you or Kakashi-senpai when I was in the Anbu, she said while Kakashi and Guy narrowed their eyes. Kagura, so you're still alive. What have you been doing? Kakashi asked, noting the seriousness of the situation. Kagura was a former Anbu of Konoha. No one had ever figured out why she had left, as she was one of the most promising Anbu that anyone could think of. Couldn't tell you that, Kakashi, but I will show you this, Kagura said as she held her hands into the air. Kakashi widened his eyes as he saw that her fate seal had a pair of symbolic wings across it, showing that she had a partner. I like to think that I could still get a little stronger. Isn't that right, Bando? Kagura asked while Bando grinned. Hand over the bitch and we might let you live, he said in the typical villain fashion. HMPH, why don't you try and make us, Sasuke said with a grin on his face. Bando glared at him hatefully and smiled. If you insist, he said and blurred out of speed. Sasuke widened his eyes as someone as large as him could move that fast. Ugh! Sasuke grunted as he was kicked far into the air. The Uchiha coughed while everyone else gasped. Naruto glared back at Kagura while Kakashi lifted his headband. It seems like I'm going to have to use this, he said, and Kagura smiled. Oh senpai, you would use that on me. I'm honored, Kagura said while Kakashi opened his left eye to reveal the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. Get them or you won't get paid. Kagura shouted and the Rouge bandits shouted in cheers as they ran forward. Shit, Kakashi said as he took out a kunai. Guy was more than ready to act, but both were surprised as Naruto walked forward. Naruto, what are you doing? This isn't someone that you can fight. She was an Anbu. She won't easily be taken down, Kakashi shouted, but he watched Naruto reach into his pockets. Don't be foolish, Hatake. I know where my limits are and I aim to break them apart. I'm just clearing out the traffic, Naruto said as he took out his leather gloves. Kagura raised an eyebrow, as did everyone else. Without worry, Naruto strapped on the gloves and cracked his knuckles. Kakashi and Guy blinked as they saw white stripes of light bashing against each other multiple times. You all think you can get in my way? Naruto asked before everyone watched as he snapped his fingers. Kai, the blonde shouted, and seals lit up on his hand as he snapped them again. A small fire suddenly appeared and raced along the line around the blonde, showing everyone the hidden wires. Naruto brought his hands together to cross the other, and it only took a second before the bandits exploded in blood and fell to the ground. Kagura widened her eyes, as did everyone else. Know your place, Naruto said, not even needing to glare at the piles of dead bodies that already laid at his feet. Omake. Let me see it. Please, please make me your apprentice. I promise I won't give up. Tenten cried as she followed after Naruto. The blonde ignored her and kept walking. Seriously, what was with this woman? She just didn't know how to take a hint. Sorry, I'm not taking apprentices at this time, Naruto responded before he felt his leg grabbed. He turned and sweat dropped as he saw Tenten crying in front of the villagers. Please, I'll do anything. Just let me see the weapon. I'll partner with you, I'll do you, I'll have your children, anything. Tenten said, and Naruto stuttered before he shook his head and tried to walk away, but Tenten's grip was strong. The people of Konoha whispered to each other at the scene they were seeing. I'm not interested in partners or kids at the moment. Get off me, Naruto said, but the bun-haired girl just wouldn't let go. She was like a freaking tick to a dog. I'll proclaim your awesomeness and wisdom to all 5 corners of the elemental nations. I'll give you my virginity, please just let me use it once. Tenten said, and this continued until Naruto arrived at his house. Let go of me right now, Naruto said, growling at her, but Tenten shook her head left and right. I'll become your slave, your mistress, maid, cook, laundry folder, doormat, anything. Naruto-kun, I need it. Tenten cried while Naruto slammed his door shut. All through the night Tenten never stopped and Naruto never got any sleep. He even got a major headache, and that was sending him to the ground currently. Tenten followed Naruto the next day as the blonde tried his best to get away from his fan, but it wasn't working. Would you just leave me alone? Naruto asked, but Tenten shook her head, the stars in her eyes becoming more apparent. Weapon, 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 she drooled and Naruto shivered. Oh god, this wasn't good. Naruto baka, where were you yesterday? We were looking all over the damn village for you. I'm gonna hit you so hard your father's going to feel it. Sakura said, cracking her knuckles. She was ready to release a punch that Naruto would block, but instead he blinked. Tenten quickly grabbed Sakura's hand and subdued her into the ground, placing it behind her back painfully. Worm, you are not to touch Naruto-sama. You are not to come in front of his awesome presence. Know your place, Tenten said as she squeezed Sakura's arm tighter. Sakura ran off crying while Naruto blinked. Thank you. Naruto asked and Tenten smiled. Anything for you Naruto-sama, she said, and Naruto's mind finally went into overdrive. Naruto walked through the village reading his book as leisurely as he could before he shifted. He narrowed his eyes and snapped his finger. La 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 la, Tenten shouted as she slammed into Hinata, who was behind a pole. You will not stalk Naruto-sama. Your eyes are unfit to gaze upon his magnificence, Tenten said at a startled Hinata. The crowds gasped as Naruto smiled. Step to one side, people. All of you one side. Out of the way of Naruto-sama if you don't want a rusted kunai up your. Tenten shouted as people backed away from the crazy girl. Naruto smirked as he walked through the village with ease. That's it. She's hired. She really knows her place, Naruto thought before someone shouted. Demon lover, he said, and Naruto noticed Tenten grin. Who said that? Tenten shouted and people backed away. Alright then. Rusted kunai up the for everyone. She shouted as she flung her rusty kunai up people anuses. People hollered as screaming rang through the village. The place was vacant and Naruto patted his legs. Tenten appeared at his side and Naruto patted her head while Tenten's tail wagged back and forth. There might be hope for you just yet, Tenten-san, Naruto said as he walked off. Sakura had a mortified expression on her face, Neji's face scrunched up in mixture of awe and disgust. Tenten shivered and Lee felt most of his legs go numb. Kakashi and Guy seemed terribly surprised. It was all because of what Naruto had just done. Kagura seemed silent as if trying to contemplate what the hell just happened to her group of bandits. The daughter of the daimyo, as well as her palanquin bearers, suddenly felt queasy but resisted the urge to lose their breakfast. Laying at Naruto's feet were the unlucky souls of foolish bandits that tried to get within even a few feet of their envoy. Blood dripped from around Naruto's wires while the flames quickly dispelled, his cold blue eyes settling down from the current sight that laid before him. He looked up and noticed everyone staring at him with awe, respect, horror, and love. Sasuke's groans could be heard in the distance, and that kicked everything off as Kagura shook her head out of the stupor that she had been put into. She looked down at the bloodstained road in front of her before she groaned. Good help is so hard to come by. You have an amazing genin, Kakashi-senpai, Kagura said, and Kakashi turned back to her as held up a kunai. Guy assumed his taijutsu stance and Naruto quickly turned around. There is only the two of them now. We'll deal with the big guy. Hatake, take her down, Naruto said, and before Kakashi could retort, Naruto ran off towards Bando. Neji and Lee quickly followed after him, and so did Tenten. The latter turned around and growled. Sakura, come on, Tenten shouted, but she only noticed Sakura shivering as she clutched her dress. He killed them. He really killed them, she said, and Tenten rolled her eyes. Now wasn't the time for this. They had a client to protect. Gah, I guess someone has to stay here and guard the daughter. I'll leave it to her, Tenten said to herself, and with a nod of her head she went to join her teammates while Kakashi and Guy took on Kagura. With Sasuke. Arg! Sasuke cried out as Bando delivered another kick to his stomach, sending the Uchiha skidding across the ground. What's wrong, boy? You told me to come over here, so I did. What are you going to do about it now? Bando asked, and Sasuke snarled before he got to his feet. He noticed the seal on Bando's right hand. The man was partnered, and by the looks of it, it was with that woman. For Sasuke to even begin to fight, he would have to know this guy's abilities and then figure out what the woman's own attributes did to his. Well, since you won't come to me, I'll come to you, Bando said, and Sasuke tensed, but he could do nothing as Bando effortlessly appeared in front of him. Sasuke tried to launch a kick, but Bando easily blocked it and, with his fist, socked Sasuke in the stomach, getting a heavy cough from the brunette Uchiha as he got the wind knocked out of him. Sasuke's vision grew blurry in the air before he reached into his pouch and took out a shuriken. He tossed it at Bando and then threw a kunai. The kunai slammed against the shuriken and allowed the shuriken to trip a wire. Bando seemed surprised and looked left and right as he saw a hail of kunai rain down upon him. Bando grinned as he jumped up and swirled in the air. Sasuke was surprised as his body began to glow with chakra. What is this chakra? He's doing something, Sasuke said, and Bando grinned as he pushed his hands outward. Futon. Shinken, wind release. Air vacuum fist, Bando shouted, and the wind deflected all kunai and shuriken, much to Sasuke's surprise. Meanwhile, Bando brought his fist back and grinned. Try not to die, Gaki. He yelled and he blasted his fist forward, sending the rush of wind towards Sasuke. The Uchiha dodged to the side and breathed a sigh of relief, but it didn't last long as he was slammed over the head by Bando's elbow, sending him to the ground. Brats who acts tough die the fastest, Bando said as he picked Sasuke up by his collar. I'm your executioner, he said, and brought his fist back. Sasuke growled against his strong arm as Bando launched his fist at Sasuke's face. Bando cackled at the intention of finishing the brat, before he felt his arm. It didn't move. Sasuke waited for the assault, but it didn't come. He opened his eye and he noticed Bando cursing. He looked over his shoulder and he noticed wires keeping his arm in place. A mess of blonde hair was in his field of vision and the cold, blue eyes stared at him relentlessly. Right next to the mess of blonde hair was his comrades. More of the brats, huh? Well, that's just fine with me, Bando said, trying to get a response from the blonde, but he didn't get one. Why have you done this most unyouthful act? Shouted the green-clad shinobi, and Bando grinned. A bandit's got to know where his next meal is coming from, don't you think? He asked, getting a growl from Neji and Tenten. Hyuga, back me up. We're going in. You're going to need to follow my orders, Naruto said, and Neji turned to him. And why should I do that? Fate has already decreed my victory in this match. He is no challenge against the Hyuga clan, Neji said, and Naruto closed his eyes. He sighed and shook his head. Why did almost everyone that this blonde worked with have to have a damn ego in everything that they did? But that was their problem, not Naruto's. Fine then, you do whatever. Tenten-san, Lee-san, back me up, Naruto said, and unlike Neji, this got the better response out of the two. Both didn't know why they were taking orders from someone younger than them, but Naruto had already taken care of more than their share of bandits, so there wasn't any reason to not go along with it. Asu. You got it, Naruto-san, Lee said eagerly, and Tenten took out a scroll with her weapons inside. Alright, Naruto-kun. What's your plan? Tenten asked, not really caring that she used the kun suffix. It wasn't a big deal at the moment. Naruto nodded and was about to say something before he noticed Neji burst off. He grumbled to himself, but quickly began to speak with Lee and Tenten. Meanwhile, Neji charged at Bando with the best of his speed, but Bando looked unimpressed by it. He quickly decided to forego the punch to the face, and settled for the kick to the gut, getting a cry from Sasuke as he was sent into a tree. The Uchiha coughed and slumped to the ground. Bando then quickly turned his body, but he wasn't ready to instantly block as Neji appeared in front of him. Hake Kusho, 8 trigrams vacuum palm, Neji shouted as he slammed Bando at the center of his chest. A powerful thrust of wind expelled from his back from the pressure while Neji smirked. However, that smirk didn't last as cackling came over the field. Naruto, Tenten and Lee noticed Neji scowling while Bando grabbed his hand. Been a long time since I killed a Hyuga. Good thing my partner and I have a unique set of skills. Did you know that if I power Raiden through my whole body then my Tenketsu don't close? You know, I used to suck at Fuden, but ever since dealing with Kagura, well, shall I just show you? Bando said, and he swiftly kicked Neji away. The Hyuga managed to block the kick, but the pain was still there as Neji grimaced. Bando then smirked as he closed in his body. That one Hyuga did a technique that I figured I could do with wind. Tell me how you like it, Bando said as he quickly closed his body in and swirled against his heel. Futon. Kanonami no Jutsu, wind release. Divine wave spin technique, Bando shouted and everyone gasped as a heavy swirl of wind expelled from his body and shot upward slamming into Neji. The Hyuga groaned and Bando laughed before he saw Naruto unzip his jacket. Out came Rinko, Tuka and Fu. They dropped down and growled while Naruto pointed forward. Rinko, blast it, Naruto ordered and Rinko yipped as she opened her mouth. Everyone was surprised as moderate blast of fire escaped from her mouth. Bando widened his eyes as the fire collided with the wind and exploded, creating a large tornado of pure fire. As the fire raced along the swirling wind, it made its way towards Neji. Naruto-kun, Neji's still in trouble. Tenten addressed and Naruto nodded. Fu slammed the ground. Tuka, unleash your first water jutsu, Naruto shouted. The other two by his side growled as Fu raised his tail into the air. Tuka opened her mouth and blasted water out of it. The water quickly took the shape of 3 water missiles that traveled through the air. Fu's tails blasted the ground and everyone shifted their stance, even Bando. He lost his balance and so did his technique as the wind shifted. The water from Toka's mouth slammed against Neji and pushed him out of danger as the fire quickly overtook the rest of the wind. Bando landed on one knee while Naruto cracked his knuckles. Tuka, Rinko, cover our presence, Naruto commanded and the kits obeyed their father figure. Rinko and Tuka opened their mouths together and Tenten, along with Lee, was surprised as fire and water mixed and a heavy steam came over the area. Bando widened his eyes as all visible traces of his opponents had disappeared from view. You can't hide forever, he shouted. With Kakashi and Guy, the sounds of kunai bashing against each other could be heard as the Kakashi and Kagura skidded back from each other. Guy jumped in the air and sent his leg at her face, but he was surprised as Kagura blocked it easily. She looked up and grinned before she grabbed Guy's leg and spun him around. She launched him into the air and stared in awe as Kagura held her fist into the air. Come on, senpai. You can do better than that, Kagura shouted as she punched the ground. The ground shook and Kakashi jumped into the air with a backflip. How is she that strong? She was never this strong as an Anbu. Does it have to do with her partner? Kakashi wondered. Naturally, Anbu were very strong. They had to be physically fit for duty and in top condition, but even as an Anbu no one had that kind of strength. Kakashi hadn't seen anything like that since. Guy, maybe. Guy, are you alright? Kakashi asked and Guy nodded. What is an A- rank missing nin doing on AC rank mission? Guy asked. Kakashi was trying to figure that one out himself as they landed away from Kagura. The white-haired female smiled and raised her legs swiftly into the air. The world is a big place, senpai. When you step out of that village then you're subject to anything and everything. I remember Kakashi senpai, no matter how much you helped me, I couldn't do Raiden. I sucked at it, but I think I got some useful skills from Bando. His powerful strength and his glorious ability for Raiden. Sayonara senpai. Raiden. Gion, lightning release. False darkness, Kagura shouted and with a quick swipe of her leg she sent a burst of lightning from her foot as he slammed across the ground. She's able to channel Raiden through her feet. That even more difficult than doing it through the fingertips. This is the worst possible thing to encounter, Kakashi thought as he and Guy ducked out of the way. Both slid across the ground as Guy threw a kunai at Kagura. The female backed away from it, but she was surprised as Kakashi chose this chance to lessen the distance between them. She took the tanto strapped to her leg and held it while Kakashi clashed against her with a kunai. The sparks flew off each other and Kagura smiled. So tell me senpai, who's the brat? Did take you as one for raising kids. In fact, I think he's more suited to the bandit life than anything else. The way he massacred those underlings was incredible, Kagura said and Kakashi glared dangerously at her. You don't know what you're talking about. Naruto's nothing like you, Kakashi said and Kagura smiled. Kakashi, look out. Guy shouted and Kakashi looked down at Kagura's free hand. It blazed in lightning and Kakashi jumped away as Kagura smiled. Glad you dodged. Now I can focus it all in one spot and, she trailed off as she slammed the fistful of Raiden chakra against the ground, sending out a burst wave of lightning through it. Kakashi and Guy gasped while Kakashi's Sharingan was working overtime to analyze everything. Kakashi quickly flashed his own hand signs while Kagura did her own. Raiden. Gion, they both shouted at the same time. Lightning flashed between them both as they forced their lightning against the other. Kakashi growled and Kagura had a maniacal grin on her face. However, the duel was stopped short as Kagura jumped out of the way from Guy's foot that slammed into the ground. She backed away and Guy sped towards her. My speed, Guy-sensei, and my recently added strength, make me a perfect opponent for you, Kagura said as her leg and Guy's came together. Both of their fists met and a quick burst of chakra came from them. Guy narrowed his eyes and Kagura kept her smile while she turned to see Kakashi behind her. You forget that there are two of us here, he said and threw a kunai at her. Kagura jumped over it and chuckled before landing on the ground. Oh, I didn't forget. I wouldn't neglect you, senpai. But you'd better hurry. I wonder if Bando made mince meat if you're brat by now, Kagura said, getting a grimace from Kakashi and Guy. With Naruto, Lee grabbed Neji and slid across the ground and they went sailing into a tree. Lee coughed and Neji groaned. Sasuke snarled and Bando folded his arms. You're all boring me here, he said to them. Naruto narrowed his eyes and so did Tenten. This wasn't a planned contingency. Tenten, follow my lead, Naruto said to her. Tenten nodded and she watched in surprise as Naruto ran across the field in the best blur of speed that he could. Bando turned and matched that speed. Naruto took out a kunai and so did Bando. They both clashed, but for a moment. It wasn't long at all and Bando grimaced as he was stabbed in the shoulder. What the hell? He said, gripping said shoulder. He saw the blonde trailing from it and he looked at his kunai. It had been cut clean through and Naruto held up his own. HMPH, don't act so surprised. A shinobi should always be aware of how well their metal is made. Your ignorance will cost you, Naruto said as he threw his special kunai into the air. Tenten, now, Naruto ordered and Bando looked as Tenten finished what she was doing. Understood, she said and everyone watched as scrolls wrapped around her as she sailed through the air. She touched the seals across the scrolls as weapon after weapon came out. Sogu. Shu Senjin manipulated tools. 1,000 blades attacked, Tenten hollered as she connected the weapons to the threads of her hands and launched them towards Bando. Tuka, your turn, Naruto shouted. Tuka yipped and a fierce blast of water escaped her mouth. Just like before, it shaped into 6 water missiles as they converged over Bando's appearance. The missiles mixed with the ninja tools adding to the number and Bando widened his eyes as Naruto jumped back. Bando wanted to do so as well, but he noticed a second Naruto holding him still. Hey, let me go you brat! He shouted, but the second Naruto's eyes gave little away before a vicious grin came across his face. Bando gasped and he turned back to see the water and ninja tools flying towards him, but he didn't move in time as they exploded against his body. Bando fell out with the clone Naruto still on his back while Naruto held up a hand sign. Kai! Naruto shouted and his bunshin exploded as Bando screamed over as lightning and water mixed. The conductivity of the ninja tools helped in the power as the lightning from Naruto's Raiden clone, Toka's water, and Tenten's tools electrocuted him. Bando cried from the sudden pain while they dropped to the ground. Tenten glanced towards Naruto and so did Tuka, waiting for their orders. Did we get him? Tenten asked, but she only got silence. No, Naruto finally said, and it was sheer instinct that allowed him to tense his body and block as Bando's fist connected to his body and launched him high into the sky. Tenten gasped as did Neji and Lee. Sasuke cursed as Naruto flipped through the air. Uchiha, Rinko, fire now! Naruto commanded. Everyone glanced towards Sasuke who struggled to his feet. He quickly did his hand signs and took a breath while Naruto brought his fist back. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Sasuke shouted at the top of his voice, sending the fire. He noticed Rinko stand next to him as she launched the same technique from her mouth. The fire went sailing towards Bando, who grinned. "You won't hit me with that," he shouted as he dodged the fire, but a voice from overhead brought him to attention. "Foolish man, it wasn't for you," Naruto said, and Bando turned his head to see the fire going towards Tenten. Tenten gulped, but she remembered Naruto's plan and looked down. Sure enough, Tuka and Fu were right in front of her. Fu slammed the ground with his tail, making an earth trench, while Tuka filled it with water. A clone from Naruto grabbed them all and jumped away as the fire collided with the water, making it explode. "What was that supposed to do?" Bando asked as most steam rolled in. He looked left and right, but unconsciously channeled wind chakra through his body just in case. Neji appeared in the steam and launched a strike at Bando, who dodged it with his speed. Lee did the same and the two continued to try to hit the man, but Bando dodged them all. He jumped, slid, blocked and rolled against everything that came his way. "Enough of this shit. Futon. Judo Tatsumaki Tika, wind release. Severe tornado drop," Bando shouted, and, from his palm, he sent a large gust of wind into the sky where Naruto had been. He grinned as the steam parted and he could see daylight. He looked up, but gasped as he saw Naruto holding a shuriken. "Those who gain abilities without having earned it are fools. You are a disgrace to wind release user," Naruto said as he threw his Fuma shuriken through the air. Tenten and everyone else was in awe of how it looked in the sunlight. It gleamed and it blasted against the wind while Bando chuckled. "Bold words. Try and do something about my disgrace of wind release, then," he shouted, and Naruto nodded. "Kai," he cried, and everyone watched as the seals on Naruto's shuriken lit up indefinitely. Wind, water, fire, lightning and earth sprayed from the blades and mixed together as it tore through the gust of wind that Bando unleashed. He gasped as the Fuma shuriken went sailing for him. Bando blocked with his body as the shuriken slammed into the ground and covered him in a mighty explosion. Naruto dropped the ground and looked while Lee helped Neji to his feet. Everyone looked and tensed before they heard laughing. "It. It all. I'm killing that bitch," Bando shouted as he, much to everyone's surprise, dashed off back towards the envoy. "Shit," Naruto said, and everyone raced back towards the carriage, but Naruto was probably the only one fast enough. He, Sasuke and Lee went ahead with Tuka, Fu and Rinko right behind them. The envoy appeared in front of them as Bando chuckled maniacally. "Haruno, stop him," Naruto shouted as they bursted through the trees. Kakashi and Guy stopped their fighting with Kagura as they saw Bando rushing for the daughter of Cha no Kuni's daimyo. Kyoko widened her eyes in fear while Sakura shivered. "Haruno," Naruto shouted, and Sakura glanced back. "Protect Kyoko-sama," a few men said, standing in front of Bando. However, in front of Sakura, they were cut down as their screams could be heard. Naruto threw a kunai, but Bando blocked it. He charged towards Kyoko, who moved to the back of her palanquin. His laughing echoed while Kagura sighed. "That idiot. We need the bitch alive, damn it," Kagura said mentally. Only then did she notice Guy and Kakashi shoot off away from her. She shook her head left and right. Meanwhile, Sakura gulped as she raised her kunai into the air. She shook it, showing her nervousness and at the crazy look in Bando's eyes. "Damn it," Naruto said as he tightened his gloves. His wires banged against each other and he threw them forward. The wires clashed and they grabbed Bando's hand. Bando glared murderously at Naruto, but the blonde didn't give a damn. Lee and Neji intercepted as they each launched an attack at him, but a sudden burst of wind pushed them away as they bashed into Naruto. The blonde cursed as they went crashing while Bando went forward. "Sakura, what are you waiting for?" Tenten shouted. Sakura shivered uncontrollably while Bando his fist back against the palanquin. "Say goodbye," he said as he sent his fist towards the delicate cart. Naruto heard a heavy crash and he pushed Lee and Neji off him. He opened his eyes fast and what he saw made his blood run cold. The palanquin was still standing, but he noticed that Fu had blocked the punch with his small body that sent him flying against the tree. He fell to the ground and twitched while Naruto growled. Futon. Shinkushoha, Naruto shouted as he blasted a burst of wind blades from his palms. Bando turned around and gasped as the wind blades cut his body and sent him flying from the ground and into the bushes. Sakura's breath calmed down, but she felt a burst of wind pass her as Naruto raced to Fu. He took his black fox into his hands and placed his chest to his ears. He wasn't moving. Damn it, Tuka, Rinko, get us out of here. Naruto said to them. Tuka and Rinko yipped as, together, they created a thick steam over the area. Son of a bitch, Kagura said before she unleashed a burst of wind to dispel the mist. It cleared up fast and Kagura noticed that other than the dead bodies, and the palanquin, they were the only ones in the field. Kyoko was gone, Team 7 was gone, Team 9 was gone and their senseis were gone. Damn, they got away. They sure organized that fast, she said to herself. She quickly collected herself and walked over to her partner. She looked down and she noticed Bando grumbling. You did this to yourself, she proceeded to slam him over the head. Idiot, she responded. Band grumbled and collected himself as well. He noticed the lack of people and fighting. So, what now? He asked. Kagura smiled and placed a hand over her hip. Don't worry. We'll see them again, she said and Bando just shrugged his shoulders and gave a nod of his head. He touched his shoulder and cursed against the pain. Let get your cleaned up. You look like shit, she said and Bando grumbled some more. You're so lucky you're my partner. Damn it, he said getting up and following her away. Elsewhere, everyone panted as they dropped to the ground. Lee had been carrying Kyoko ever since the two teams had made their escape. Everyone was silent. They didn't feel like talking really. Sakura was probably the slowest out of all of them. In front of them was Naruto holding Fu in his hands. He looked down and Fu felt warm. It was probably just his body heat. Don't worry Fu. You'll be fine, Naruto said. Rinko and Tuka whimpered as Tuka licked Fu's cheek. So what do we do now? Tenten asked. No one seemed to have an answer for her, but they were surprised when Naruto spoke. We keep heading to Cha no Kuni. There is a large house in the woods on the map. We'll rest there, Naruto said. No one felt like going against him or even asking him how he knew those things, so they just raced on. Just like Naruto had said, in half an hour they were in front of the house. It was rough, sort of old, but it looked sort of comfortable. Running water, beds, lights worked, and heating utilities. Everyone walked inside and before anyone knew it, there was raining outside. It was weird because the sky had been clear. Naruto looked out and shook his head. As people collected themselves on what happened, Sakura looked over to see Naruto push down a mat. He placed Fu down and the blonde quickly went into his pouch. He pulled out a medic kit and opened it. Naruto-san, what are you? Lee stopped as Tenten placed a hand on his shoulder. She shook her head and Lee frowned. He backed away while Naruto took a needle and pulled out some medicinal herbs. Everyone was silent while Naruto leaned his ear down. He channeled his chakra through his body to take the impact and lessen the blow. Fu, you idiot, Naruto thought and a heavy sigh escaped his lips. Naruto-san, is there anything we can do? Kyoko asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes and clenched his clothes. Rinko and Tuka looked over Fu before laying down next to him to help warm his body. No thank you, Naruto said softly. Sakura walked up to him and bowed. Naruto, I'm sorry. It was my fault. If only I didn't freeze, then I would've. Sakura trailed off while Naruto just stayed silent. Just get out, Naruto said and Sakura widened her eyes. Naruto I. She flinched as everyone felt Naruto's chakra rise slightly. Just get out, he said and everyone quickly left the blonde alone in the room. He sighed and shook his head. He took a bottle and pulled it over the faucet getting some hot water. He filled the bottle and poured the water into a bowl that had some leaves in it. He crushed the leaves with the bottom end of the kunai, allowing for the materials inside to integrate into the water. Rinko, heat the water. Normal faucet water isn't high enough to help. Make it boil just a little, Naruto said. Rinko yipped and blew her fire under the bowl, allowing for the water to slowly boil. Rinko soon stopped and Naruto took in the smell of fresh herbs that had grown in the forest of death. His kits had grown on these herbs to make them stronger. It had taken Naruto reading multiple biology books on nutritious plants for all of them. That was just the type of foxes they were. It didn't take long for Tuka and Rinko to have their ears twitch as Naruto turned around to notice the door open. Tenten and Kyoko appeared and came through. Naruto sighed and shook his head. What? Naruto asked impatiently. Kyoko and Tenten looked at each other and Kyoko bowed. Naruto-san, your friends are currently discussing our predicament. Kakashi-san, I think it was, said that why you're on thin ice as it is, Kyoko said, and the blonde narrowed his eyes. He looked back at Fu and noticed the wet leaves in the boiling water. Very well. It would be foolish to not talk about this, Naruto said, getting up. He walked towards the door and, without looking back, spoke. Once you see a small dark red spot in the water, gently place a cloth over Fu's body. Make sure that Rinko keeps the temperature to an exact 35 degrees. Understood? Naruto asked. Realizing that he was trusting her to look after Fu while he spoke, Kyoko quickly nodded with a bow. Hi, I'll carefully look after them, she said, and Naruto just walked out while Tenten followed him. Kyoko turned back to the foxes, who tensed from their presence. She slowly advanced towards them and sat on the ground. She softly petted Fu's black fur before taking notice of the water. In truth, the things that Kyoko had seen just put her through too much. Her bearers had died protecting her. They were against powerful bandits and she was the one that they were after. She sighed and watched as in the center of the water was a dark red spot. She quickly dipped a cloth in water and placed it over Fu's body. You'll be all right, little one, she said, trying her best smile. Rinko and Tuka glanced to each other before they assumed their rest against Fu's cold body. With Naruto, the blonde and Tenten came into the room where everyone was gathered. Sasuke was having his wounds nursed by Kakashi. Guy and Lee seemed a little too serious. Neji was. Neji, and Sakura was looking at the ground while leaning against the wall. No doubt her freezing up at the battlefield was hard. I've brought Naruto-kun, Guy-sensei, Tenten said, getting everyone to look up. They all saw Naruto, with his cold, blue eyes as usual. He and Tenten came inside before everyone noticed something sail through the air and land into Naruto's hand. The blonde glared at it and he noticed that it was his Fuma shuriken that he had foolishly left at the battlefield. He turned his head and he noticed Neji with his hand out. You should remember to pick up your stuff if you're going to leave it out in the field. HMPH pathetic, Neji said, but to everyone's surprise Naruto said nothing and quickly sealed his Fuma shuriken. He leaned against the wall and Tenten leaned between Naruto and Neji. Alright, now that we're all here we can go over some things. It's obvious that this wasn't foreseen by the instructors. This is easily an B rank mission, if not an A- rank mission. We weren't ready for such an assault. First we have to figure out where we are and how far we are from the checkpoint, Kakashi said, and everyone nodded while Tenten pulled out a map. We're right on the divide between Hai no Kuni and Cha no Kuni. It's getting late actually. The sun is setting. We should go either tomorrow or the day after, Tenten said, getting nods from everyone. Speaking of that, Naruto-san, how did you know about this place? Lee asked and Kakashi glanced towards the blonde. He narrowed his eyes and Naruto snorted. Because it's one of the more current maps. Tenten-san's map is over 2 months old. I stay current, Naruto said, and no one could refute that, so everyone left it alone. Kakashi turned back to Sasuke's wounds and quickly finished. The Uchiha grumbled and got up before rubbing his sore body. He glared at Naruto, but the blonde paid no mind. Kakashi-sensei, who was that Kagura woman? Sakura asked, finally getting her nerves together enough to ask something. Kakashi turned to her and his expression was more than a little grave at the thought. Kagura was a former Anbu of Konoha. She left for unknown reasons. Not much is known about her, but she was a prodigy in Fudan techniques. In the Anbu, there is a rule that you must have a partner or you more than likely won't be drafted. Something about it doing that, Kakashi said to them. Kakashi, if that's true then what about you? You weren't partnered, Guy said and Kakashi sighed. He clenched his right hand and looked away. It's not something I want to talk about, Kakashi said making everyone go silent. So if she's partnered and she's been in the Anbu then does that mean that she's even stronger now? How are we going to beat them? Sakura asked. Everyone glanced to each other and Lee raised his hand. Guy-sensei, what if one of us partnered? Lee suggested. Tenten and Sakura blushed. Tenten looked between Naruto and Neji while Sakura looked at Sasuke. I doubt it would make a difference if you genin partnered. You don't have enough skills to truly take them on, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Don't be foolish Hatake. It's underestimation like that which will get you killed, Naruto said with a scoff. Kakashi narrowed his eye at his blonde student. I have no need for a partner, Neji said scoffing at the very idea. Tenten sighed before she glanced to Naruto. The blonde genin just said nothing. He tried to keep his concern for food to a low, but it wasn't working out as well as he might have wanted. Well, in any case, you won't have to worry about such things, but Naruto, what happened with the bandits? I have seen ninja wire before, but such brutality was rather unnecessary, Kakashi said and everyone turned to Naruto. That is not brutal Hatake. Brutal is me cutting off all their limbs and leaving them alive while I use my wires to suffocate them to death. I used the efficient method. Because of it we're not as exhausted as we might have been. The words unnecessary or too much do not apply to this world, Naruto said and everyone noticed Sasuke get to his feet. Sasuke-kun, are you alright? Sakura asked helping Sasuke, but the Uchiha pushed her out of his way and made his way towards Naruto. Sasuke stood right in front of his face and scowled. Give me those weapons Dobi. That Fuma shuriken, those wires, your kunai. I want everything on you of use. Sasuke demanded. Naruto blinked and titled his head to the side. Tenten sighed. Neji shook his head, Sakura frowned, Lee seemed confused while Kakashi and Guy narrowed their eyes. Everyone was waiting for some big retort from Naruto about it not being Sasuke's and how he could shove it up his, but they were surprised when Naruto said, alright. Tenten widened her eyes and everyone else gasped, but Kakashi probably knew where Naruto was about to go with this. Sasuke grinned thinking he finally got what he wanted as Naruto went into his pouch. He quickly unsealed a calculator and mumbled. Let's see, one Fuma shuriken, 1 pair of wire gloves, 15 sets of kunai and shuriken, and 5 specially made swords. That's everything I have with me, Naruto assessed and Sasuke's arrogant grin got even wider, but it dropped instantly as Naruto turned the calculator around. Your total is over 9 million yen. Cash up front, Naruto said holding out his hand. Sasuke gasped while Tenten seemed surprised. What did you say to me? Sasuke asked and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. You thought I'd give it away for free. Foolish Uchiha, don't you dare come before me with such notions again. It's simple, we will leave in 2 days and we'll get there like normal, then we'll go on about our regular lives, Naruto said walking off. Sasuke seethed and Tenten smirked, but didn't let it show. Neji just snorted and closed his eyes. Kakashi didn't say anything and neither did Guy. The matter was finished as far as they were concerned. Naruto, having left the meeting room, went back to the main lobby and came up to see Rinko and Tuka yipping happily at him. Naruto gave a small smile and scratched their ears. He heard another yip and he looked over to see Fu yipping happily at him. Naruto slowly scratched Fu's fur, getting a light purr from the fox. I did as you asked, Kyoko said and Naruto turned to her. He turned back to his kits and they nodded happily as the blonde turned to her. Uzumaki. Uzumaki Naruto, Kyoko-sama. I would like to formally apologize for my previous actions. I am very protective of my kits. I am sorry if I offended you in any way, Naruto said, bowing, and Kyoko blushed at how handsome the blonde looked just then before clearing her throat. Oh, it was nothing, Naruto-san. I apologize for acting spoiled with things that you hold. I was wrong, Kyoko said with a gentle smile on her face. Naruto just nodded and quickly bandaged Fu's lower body. Naruto picked him up and Fu gave a gentle lick of the blonde's face. Naruto gave a gentle smile while Rinko and Tuka yipped happily around him. Kyoko chuckled and Naruto shook his head as he looked at his kids. Naruto-san, when do you think we will be leaving? Kyoko asked, and Naruto's gentle glare turned serious, but not as much as before. We'll be setting out in 2 days. Do not worry. I will get you home, Naruto said, and Kyoko nodded as she left the room. Naruto took Rinko, Tuka and Fu, then left the area behind. Somewhere, Kisa walked through the halls of a hotel with an attendant and 2 bodyguards. Both bodyguards were classified as missing nin, but then again, to have protection then you needed to sometimes bend the rules, but this was as much that Naruto had ever let her bend the rules to the use of his business. It had put Kisa on edge with what was going on, but she didn't have the time to worry about that. What room is it? Kisa asked impatiently. The attendant right behind her gulped, but held his notepad as easily as he could. Our room 402, he said, and Kisa nodded. She had foregone her casual attire and adorned a female business suit. The dress hugged her body in the right places, but Kisa was not a woman to be trifled with. She had more than her fair share of perverts hitting on her, and she'd hit right back. It was one of her more endearing qualities. Kisa had been a retired Jonin shinobi for Kusagaker. Her first bodyguard was more than half her age, heck, maybe even less than that. Ryazetsu, I want you on guard for anything. This asshole even lifts his cane, then I expect a blast of kunai lunging at his damn throat. I hardly like the eyesore as it is, Kisa said to the younger girl. Ryazetsu nodded with a bow of her head as they continued to walk through the entire building. Fugai, do the very same, Kisa said to an older woman, as compared to Ryazetsu. Fugai nodded her head, though it was a given that she wasn't happy, at least not at the moment. Fugai hated the person they were about to meet. She was an orphan and never really had much of a fair life. That's why when Kisa and Naruto had introduced themselves to her 2 years ago, she had jumped at the chance for a better life. The others were back taking care of the company. Understood, Kisa-sama, she said, and Kisa came up to the door 402. All 3 came up to the room, but it wasn't actually a room. Well, it was, but it was a meeting room. In that meeting room were about 3 people. 2 men and 1 woman. That was minus Kisa herself. They all had their own bodyguards with them and glanced across from each other. Kisa sighed and opened the door, signifying her presence. Kisa looked to her left and she noticed the woman. The woman was just as old as her, however she adorned her body with many jewels across her fingers, clothes and hair. She was obviously very rich and well kept, and she also had an arrogance look about her. Her fancy dress, red hair, and brown eyes. Her name was Ayano, and she was the mistress of Ayano's general clothing. Her clothes were sought throughout the nations as a one-of-a-kind civilian comfort and even shinobi comfort. In all honesty, her company had made a very expensive fabric. It was a special and durable fabric that even kept shinobi attire right. Ayano's company was namely the company to go to when shopping. She had taken over multiple family-owned businesses, making her the top leading expert in clothing. Right behind her were 3 samurai. Nothing Fugai or Ryazetsu couldn't handle. Also nothing Kisa couldn't handle herself. She looked to her left and she saw a short man that she more than hated with a good amount of her being. His name was Gato, and he was in control of the company Gato's Shipping. He was a very short man, in comparison to the average male, but let it be known that behind his short height was a mountain of money, power, and political intelligence. He wore a suit in black shades. He had a sleazy look on his face, but Kisa ignored it. He was a magnate and one of the most powerful ones. At one point Exodus Metal and Gato's shipping had a dealing for about a year or so. It was successful because Exodus Metals could now ship metals to where they wanted and Gato would receive a portion of profits, but that turned south fast. Exodus Metals detached itself from Gato and never looked back. It was one of the things that made Kisa the happiest. However, since Gato's not-so-recent backwater assault against Exodus Metals' territory, then it could be said that he was really playing with fire. Right behind him were two other samurai. Kisa didn't care. She just made an observation. Still, Fugai and Ryazetsu could handle that shit. Right next to Gato was probably the one rich guy that Kisa even felt a sense of normality for. His name was Daichi. He was a 20-year-old male who was something of a philanthropist, but in an extreme way. He was the president of Eterna Wings Company. He exported in the food, water, and electrical industry. That had to deal with the survive of humanity. Kisa wouldn't say that he was a pacifist or something like that, but he was more neutral. He had brunette hair and a solid look of experience. Something similar to Naruto's, but he couldn't pull it off as well. His business was virtually the thing that helped people to have good economic growth in terms of energy. He only mostly exported to the smaller villages and countries, but those like Suna were always a place where he could get money. He was the only one that Kisa was even impassive with. Ayano, she felt like being a bitch. Gato, she wanted to gut him like a fish. Right behind him was one person. She had a lone sword at her waist and her brown hair went down to her waist. This was a person that Fugai might have trouble with. Together, all four of them made up the very economy of the shinobi world. Daichi rested near the northwest regions such as Iowa, Suna, Taki, and maybe Kusa. Gato rested near Wave, and Kiri. Ayano's control was basically in Kumo and going down. Naruto and, by connection Kisa, rested in Kunibi was responsible for Konoha and their allies. They were the lead four. Although, there were other large companies that could be seen as on par with them, they weren't. The four had something that no one else truly had. They had political power. It was mainly their companies and their regions that hired shinobi of other places. Naturally, it had only been 3 from about 7 years ago. The upstart of Exodus Metals had shifted all the power and Kisa knew that no one liked it. It just meant more sharing of spoils and profit, but hey, that was business. Naturally, none of them ever knew who the true president of Exodus Metals actually was, but they had all tried to investigate. Since Kisa became the daimyo of Kuni, then it was assumed that she had an agreement with the president, but Kisa became the face of it. However, those who were senior members of the department knew who the true president was. It was because they, themselves, had been recruited. They knew why the president hid and couldn't wait for the day that he would be brought to light. No doubt it would shake a lot of heads. Now they weren't powerful in terms of ever equaling the hidden villages. It didn't work that way and that wasn't anyone's goal. They all had different goals from each other, but they all required money for it. They were powerful in the sense that countries needed them. Without them, there would be instability. In this business, power, money and revenue is everything. Something Kisa had well learned when she was a younger woman. Kisa sat down in her chair while Ryazetsu and Fugai stood behind her. Fashionably late as ever, Exodus Metals Chan? Ayano asked, but Kisa stayed silent and folded her arms. Gato grinned and crossed his fingers together. I thought it was made that all of us would be meeting. Did the president get cold feet? Gato asked. Fugai growled and Ryazetsu did the same. They really didn't like this tone, but this was something that Naruto was to deal with. It is none of your concern, Gato. I've been given temporary control over the company by our president. Especially after what you've already done to us. This won't be a problem since the president speaks highly of my abilities, Kisa said, and everyone knew what she was talking about. Daichi glared at Gato, but didn't do more than that. Ayano chuckled to herself as she waved a fan to cool her body. That is true, isn't it? It's become somewhat of local news now, Daichi spoke, getting nods from everyone. Kisa placed one leg over the other and Gato smirked. It's no big thing. I just saw that wave would need help and I took it readily. They've never been better. Also Daichi, you should stop trying to send your workers there. I have things under control, Gato said, and the female swordsman twitched, which got everyone on edge. Ryazetsu and Fugai slowly inched towards their kunai sword. However, Daichi stayed his hand and she calmed down. Yes, I suppose that's right. Forgive my intrusion, Gato-san. You are the oldest out of all of us, Daichi said, getting a smirk from Gato. Of course the man knew that he was the oldest out of all of them and he wanted nothing more than to run these three into the ground. That is very right, kid. I am the oldest and I think you all know that just because we have this temporary meeting that we are far from allies, Gato said, and everyone heard Kisa scoff. Most of the guards turned to her in confusion. This got everyone's attention as Gato frowned and behind his glasses was a murderous glare. Something you want to add? Gato asked. Kisa narrowed her eyes dangerously before a smirk came across her face. Kisa leaned forward and tapped the table with her slender finger. Daichi raised an eyebrow and Ayano looked amused. Gato stayed silent as Kisa spoke. That is true, we're not allies. However, we all do at least have a code of conduct. We try not to mess with each other's business as it indirectly affects one of us. If I remember, I was the one who made that rule, Kisa spoke and Ayano chuckled. Your president was the one who made that rule. It was something that we all went along with and still do. That's right. We want no strife. If I remember, then it states that if one encroaches on the boundaries of the other, then the two are considered at war, Ayano said, and all eyes shifted between Gato and Kisa. Just something I would like us to remember, Kisa said, leaning back. The guards felt uncomfortable for some odd reason. The only ones who seemed fine were Fugai, one of Ayano's guards, and the female swordsman of Daichi. Then we will remember that, Gato said to her. Kisa nodded and turned her head forward. Still, I would think that you'd have a little more class than that, Gato. You do buy my suits, Yano, Ayano said with a lecherous smile. Gato just snorted and folded his arms before touching a piece of his collar. I do buy them. It's just that it's very good clothing, you know, Gato said, getting a wider smile from Ayano. Kisa just snorted, but kept her professionalism. More like because every other clothes store you have is too poor to make some shit for you. Naruto, why do I have to be the face of this company until you come out? Kisa thought to herself. So now that we're all here, shall we get down to it? Ayano asked, getting Daichi, Gato, and Kisa to agree. Great. Well, Exodus Metals is, regrettably, the highest one with income at the moment, so they shall go first. Kisa-san, where has your movement taken you? Ayano asked, and Kisa smirked. The recent trade movement of metals packaging has led us towards Kumogakure. As you know, they, along with Kiri, are known for their swords. They do have contacts with us and we're still leading in that regard. Although the strain that Gato has put on us is a dent, Kisa said, growling. She growled more when Gato's grin widened. The samurai behind him snickered, but said nothing. Ah yes. I would still like to express my apologizes to you. However, there was one troublemaker. A man named Kaiza. He believed so much in what he was doing, but he brought my business down and so I ended him. You can never be too careful, Gato said. Kisa did all she could not to explode and succeeded. There was a fisherman of Wave. His name had been Kaiza. Kisa had always heard reports from him in Wave. He was always adamant about helping Exodus Metals, that he had become a worker. When he had died, Exodus Metals had really lost one of their best members. I suppose we've all had that point with troublemakers, Ayano said, looking away. Daichi said nothing and neither did Kisa. Very well. Also, Eterna has an existing contract with Exodus. Kisa-san, must we renew our contract? Daichi asked. Kisa pulled out some papers and held them in her face. There is no need for that. We considered it and our ties still hold strong. Exodus Metals is allowed to sell and export their metals to the regions, and Eterna is allowed to become the secondary conduct of economic stability to Exodus locations. Even should the villages ask for trade, we turn them down until we negotiate. It has worked well for us this far. Nothing more than that, Kisa replied. Daichi nodded and stepped back from the talk, allowing things to proceed. Everyone went on with their meeting and their talk about their businesses and the newest leads to technology and the way that the world was going. It wasn't that hard to actually have started the meeting and no commotions were made known. Naturally, the four had reasons to be angry with each other, but that was business to a T. It was just the way that companies like theirs worked. So the railways that are planning to lead from Kusa to you are going to be better transported for civilians, and they must have their passports at all time to ride through the countries. You know, Kuni already doesn't tax its people as much since Exodus metals became their leading export. The passports can be obtained in any of the 4 stores between Iwa and Konoha, Daichi assessed. Everyone agreed with that assessment as they got to their feet. Ayano and her guards quickly left with a slight wave. Daichi gave a bow and excused himself, leaving only Kisa and Gato. You really are, and you know, Kisa said, and Gato chuckled. I've been called worse woman. You're telling me nothing, but don't think you can take me on. I've been at this game longer than you, and when your president wants to stop hiding, then he'll know where to find me, Gato said, getting glares from Ryazetsu and Fugai. Kisa, however, chuckled and patted Gato's shoulder. The samurai tensed, and so did Fugai and Ryazetsu. They glanced to each other and Kisa stopped. Trust me, Gato. Enjoy yourself as much as you can. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, or it might not even be next month, but do you know what happened to the last person who crossed our president? Kisa asked and licked her lips. Well, let's just say that there is a term now called quadruple jointed. It's even better than being double jointed, you know, Kisa said before she gave Gato a goodbye with her associates. Gato growled before another grin came across his face. I can't wait till you're mine, Kisa. I want to see the look on your face when I capture you. It won't take me long to break that strong spirit of yours. I'll be my little for the rest of your life with your president's head adorning my cane, Gato said with an evil grin as he walked out. Back at the inn, but Sasuke-kun, if we partner then I'm sure you could beat him. You need a partner, Sakura said while Sasuke continued to do his tree walking exercises. I don't need help. I am an Uchiha. Besides, who would be my partner? You. I'd sooner take Naruto than you, Sasuke said, though a shudder went through his body as he said that. I appreciate the sentiment, but I do not go that way, Uchiha. Kindly keep me out of your fantasies, Naruto said, getting a scowl from Sakura and Sasuke, but soon Sakura turned meek and walked up to Naruto. The blonde stayed silent, but watched as Sakura frowned. I really am sorry, Naruto. If I didn't freeze, then the bearers wouldn't be gone and you wouldn't have had your fox hurt. I just wasn't. Sakura stopped and Naruto turned around. You're not used to this job. It is understandable, Haruno. It wasn't your fault. Next time, steel your mind and think of nothing else. You'll be fine. Just keep training. It wasn't your fault, Naruto said, and Sakura looked left and right, but she didn't see Naruto's kits with him this time. So, where are your foxes? Sakura asked and Naruto pointed back to the house. They are with Kyoko-san for the moment. I have asked for her to give them their food while I train. She's proven effective in the matter, Naruto replied, getting a nod from Sakura. So we're moving out tomorrow, right? Sakura asked and Naruto just pulled out a literature book. That's right. Be prepared. No doubt those two are going to try and again. Come on, we have training to do, Naruto said, and both nodded. After their training, which turned out to be another teamwork exercise given to them by Kakashi, much to Naruto's irritation, they all gathered around the dinner table. It had been quaint to say the least in how good it was. Kyoko had decided to cook everyone's food since they all were helping to protect her. As they all ate their food silently, mostly everyone's eyes were on Naruto, who was holding a spoon of milk to Fu's mouth. The black fur drank the milk and yipped happily while Naruto smiled. Fu was still very much hurt. He could walk around and even run for rehabilitation, but fighting wasn't going to come to him for a while. There, now go play with Rinko and Tuka, Naruto said as he let Fu down. Fu nodded and ran off to go with his sisters. Naruto-san, have you always done that? Kyoko asked and Naruto nodded. It's what I do for my kids, Naruto said before going silent. He had been too talkative lately. He wanted to get back to his reading. So it's decided then. We talked about it and it's up to all of you if you wish to be partnered this early. It's a simple process. I've seen it happen, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Instantly, Naruto got up and walked off as he excused himself from the table. He disappeared into the shadows of the night while others sighed. Neji followed and Tenten sighed sadly again. Lee was looking at Sakura, but Sakura was looking at Sasuke. Tenten walked off having finished her food. Will I get stronger? Sasuke asked. Kakashi and Guy glanced to each other. Things were silent for a long time, but Kakashi spoke up. It's not about getting stronger, Sasuke, but you will depending on who you partner with, Kakashi said and Sasuke got up. Then no thanks. If I won't make me stronger then I have no use for it. Only those who can ever match me will partner with me, Sasuke said, got up, and left leaving Sakura dejected. Lee tried to console her, but she didn't seem to let it affect her. Kakashi and Guy shook their heads. That's why it was hard for Genin, and maybe Chunin to find partners. Because they all didn't know what they were truly looking for and partnering with your crush was a dominant thing. By Junin you get rid of such mentalities. What are we going to do, Kakashi? Guy asked and Kakashi shook his head. I have no idea, Guy. We're just going to have to get lucky somewhere, Kakashi said holding a cup of tea in his hands. Meanwhile, Naruto appeared in his shared room with Neji, Lee, and Kakashi. He sat in a meditative pose and closed his eyes. He slowed his breathing and focused on nothing. Now that there wasn't anyone around he could get this done and out of the way. Naruto opened his eyes and he instantly stared at a large cage. It bars barring anything from coming out. He could feel the malicious chakra coming out of it and walked up to the gates. He knew something was compelling him too, but he didn't resist it. Closer, a voice said and Naruto walked closer. He never stopped his stride. He also didn't even flinch as claws pierced through the gates and tried to impale him. The blonde just looked bored at the intimidation act and shook his head. Soon a powerful chakra force appeared in front of him and the blonde just looked up. So glad my container can visit me, it said and Naruto closed his eyes. Kyuubi no Yoko. I'm unimpressed, Naruto said. Right behind the bars was the Kyuubi no Yoko. The nine-tailed demon fox that attacked Konoha 12 or 13 years ago. It was right in front of Naruto trying to blast the blonde with nearly enough ki to make him choke, but Naruto was used to things of this level. Unimpressed. You insignificant insect. If it wasn't for me you would be more dead than the enemies that you have fought. Don't you dare disrespect me, whelp. Kyuubi bellowed and Naruto blinked. He looked down at the sewer water in front of him before bowing. That is true. It would be foolish to not acknowledge that. Thank you for your efforts, Naruto said and that seemed to pacify Kyuubi at least a little bit. Shut up. I don't care about you. If you die then I die and I will prolong my survival, Kyuubi said while Naruto snorted. HMPH your survival. Either it's that or you're foolish as well. I figured you Biju couldn't die, Naruto said suspiciously. Don't glare at me, brat. I know shit that you've never be able to comprehend. I still like living if you do or don't know. Kyuubi snarled and Naruto snorted. I guess that's one thing you share with the majority of humanity, but foolish Kitsune, just because you want survival doesn't mean you will get it. Your life is in my hands, Naruto said turning around. And your kids' lives are in mine, Kyuubi said and he noticed Naruto flinched. Explain, Naruto said coldly. Kyuubi stayed silent and the grin on his face got bigger, but Naruto channeled 5 Fuinjutsu seals through his hands and opened his jacket. He slammed them into the seal on his stomach and twisted it. Instantly Kyuubi felt pressure and was slammed into the ground. Explain. Right. Now, Naruto said, glaring at the fox. Kyuubi growled while Naruto folded his arms. So fine, Kyuubi decided to humor his jailer. You really think that you teaching your kids to use chakra was what made it work? Please, they spent so much time around you that I was able to leak just the smallest traces of Yuki into their bodies. That fire that Rinko can use, that water that Tuka can use, Fu's use of chakra to harden his body, that was all me, brat. Have you ever heard of an animal breathing any other that huffs of air or water? Please, brat. It's because of me that they can. Kyuubi stopped and snarled as Naruto glared murderously at him. He walked up to the fox, past the gates that barred Kyuubi from him, and looked at the fox at eye level. If you ever do anything to hurt my kids, I will find more than 10 different ways to make your stay in my body unpleasant. I know I can't kill you and I know I won't be letting you out, but I will make your stay so unpleasant that you will never find the time to even relax in here. Remember that, Naruto said and backed away. You think this cage will hold me back? Don't be ridiculous. I will get out and you'll be the first thing that I devour, Kyuubi said, getting Naruto took look back. I'll be speaking with you later, Naruto said as he vanished. Kyuubi grumbled and thrashed his tails around. HMPH, at least the brat's intelligent. If not at all, Kyuubi thought as he closed his eyes. Naruto opened his eyes and he noticed Rinko, Tuka and Fu at his feet looking at him worriedly. Naruto raised his hand and slowly brought it down over Rinko, Tuka and Fu. They leaned into their father's embrace and fell asleep. You really think that you teaching your kids to use chakra was what made it work? Naruto narrowed his eyes and pulled his kids closer. He then pulled up the covers over their bodies and his. The blonde fell asleep and closed his eyes for the night. Next morning, everyone was running along the trees towards their destination. They had decided to save time and get there faster so that they wouldn't have to deal with an unexpected ambush of some sort. Kakashi had Kyoko on his back in a piggyback ride. In Kyoko's hands was Fu. Naruto had charged Kyoko with taking care of Fu for the good majority of the way, which elated Kyoko that when she had taken care of Fu that first time that Naruto had, sort of, trusted. She couldn't get as much freedom as she would have liked, but she could take it. His black fur felt so soft to her fingers. It was obvious that Naruto always treated his kits well. They were healthy, furry, and soft. The whole package. I really wish Otu-sama would let me have a fox or pet, Kyoko thought to herself. So does everyone remember the plan? Kakashi asked and everyone nodded. They all glared forward and they quickly jumped to the ground. Just over the hill in front of them was Cha no Kuni. They had already passed a few homes and now they were in the nearest part of the plains. Everyone was on edge for anything. Now Naruto and Neji were in the front. Sakura and Tenten at the sides, Lee and Sasuke at the back. No one got far before Naruto and Neji stopped. They looked left and right while Kakashi looked up. Sakura, Tenten, protect Kyoko-sama, Kakashi said, bringing the girl down. Sakura and Tenten nodded as they stayed at Kyoko's side. Fu could feel the daimyo's daughter shiver as she clutched him a little tighter. Fu growled, but didn't move. His father had told him to rest and he would comply. Kakashi and Guy moved forward while Sasuke and Lee came up to Naruto and Neji's side. Everyone seemed ready while Kakashi quickly threw up his Sharingan. Guy shifted into his taijutsu stance and it all happened fast as a burst of wind and lightning came across the plains. Everyone jumped out of the way as the ground was pierced by the two techniques. Be ready, Kakashi said, and everyone was. As the wind rushed them, Naruto and Sasuke stood together. Both finished their hands and took deep breaths. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Sasuke shouted. Kaden. Daienden, Naruto hollered, and both sent their flames merging together and spiraling towards the fire as it overtook it and went blazing through the field. It soon exploded under everyone's watch as Kakashi and Guy took out their kunai. Everyone noticed the fires split apart as Kagura and Bando walked towards them. Both had the same grins on their faces as they made their presence known. Sakura gulped and unconsciously backed away, but a hand from Tenten steadied her body. So you've come back, Kakashi said, and Kagura nodded with a smile on her face. Damn straight, senpai. You get one more chance. Hand over the bitch and you live, she said, but she wasn't surprised as Kakashi shook his head. That's not going to happen, Kagura. As a missing nin of Konoha, your future is death, Kakashi said as he and Guy charged full throttle towards Kagura and Bando. Both took their stances and chuckled madly. Kakashi and Guy quickly closed the distance between their targets as they neared them. Kakashi drew his kunai back and lunged at Bando, but he was surprised as Bando channeled Fuden chakra to his legs and blurred past Kakashi as he ran straight for Kyoko. Damn, Kakashi said and went to turn around, but a kick from Kagura blocked Guy and Kakashi from their target as both narrowed their eyes. Bando continued on his way towards his target and his fist back. Naruto tightened his gloves while Sasuke and Neji charged at the man. You got lucky last time, but now we're ready for you. Sasuke said, and Bando got an even wider grin across his face as he sent a punch to Sasuke's jaw. The Uchiha managed to block it, but it didn't stop him from flying into the air. He gritted his teeth as Bando snickered. Hake Kusho, Neji shouted as he slammed Bando in the chest. However, this had the same effect as last time as Bando charged his body with Raiden Chakra, allowing for his Tenketsu to not be closed by Neji's attack. Not gonna work, brat, he said and kicked Neji, but he was surprised as the kick was mere inches from the Hyuga's face. Neji turned his head and he noticed Naruto using both his hands to restrain Bando. The blonde snapped his fingers as fire trailed over the wires. Burn. Uzu Hai no Mai, swirling flame burn dance, Naruto said as he swirled his body. Everyone gasped as Bando's body was lifted off the ground and he swirled along with Naruto's spinning. He was sent crashing across the ground as the flames continued to trail up the wires and burn his leg. Bando cursed from the pain against his person as he was thrashed around like a puppet, and everyone could see a large, beautiful swirl of flame surrounding Bando before Naruto sent him crashing into the bushes. The wires clashed against each other and the blonde glared behind him. Haruno, Tenten, take her home. They can't stop all of us. Do it while there is still time, Naruto ordered. But what about you guys? Sakura asked worriedly. Naruto rubbed his cheek free of some dirt that had come on his face before snorting. Now isn't the time to be foolish and question me, Haruno. Just do it, Naruto ordered with more vigor. Neji, Sasuke and Lee nodded while Sakura seemed hesitantly. She looked up ahead to see Guy and Kakashi furiously fighting with two Kaguras that had been matching them. Alright, we'll come back as fast as we can. Kyoko-sama, this way, Sakura said as Tenten and the pink-haired girl brought the daughter through the plains. Kyoko looked back and she noticed Naruto glaring at her. He looked at Fu in her arms and mouthed, "Take care of him for me." Kyoko nodded to his request as Sakura and Tenten raced away. This wasn't lost on Kagura as she turned her head. "And where do you think you're going?" she hollered as she threw a kunai at Tenten and Sakura's direction. The two girls gasped, but the kunai was quickly blocked by Guy. They kept running and soon Kagura took out her tanto and charged at the girls. She blurred past Kakashi and Guy much to their amazement and shock. She was ready to cut one of the girls down as she held her tanto overhead. "Die!" Kagura shouted as she brought it down. However, it didn't only met with a clash as she saw Kakashi glaring at her, his Sharingan spinning. "What? How did you?" "It's simple, I've known you for quite a while, Kagura. Because I hadn't seen you in a while I had to get used to your new speed, but now I've got you perfectly. Now why don't you pick on someone your own size?" Kakashi asked and Kagura growled as the two clashed against each other. "Dynamic entry," Guy shouted at the top of his voice. Kagura turned her head and gasped, but she then smirked as her clone took the force of the kick and neutralized it. The Kagura clone attempted a kick, but Guy avoided it as the real Kagura could focus on Kakashi. "You're playing with fire, senpai," she said, and Kakashi narrowed his eyes, but he widened his eye as Kagura began to quickly push him back with her strength. "Damn, that's right, she's got Bando's strength as well," Kakashi thought. Dai senpai. Kagura cried as lightning sprang from her sword. Kakashi quickly jumped away as Kagura slashed his kunai apart with her recent lightning nature. He backflipped away while Kagura grinned. Now that I think about it, I haven't shown my wind abilities, have I? Kagura asked, and Kakashi widened his eye as Kagura brought her sword back. She then quickly swung it forward as fast as she could. The only thing that saved Kakashi was his instinct to duck as he looked past him. He narrowed his eye as he saw a row of tree behind him fall to the ground in a perfect slice. Muon K's. Hokkaidan, silent wind, breaking points, Kagura mumbled. Kakashi felt a bead of sweat leave his face at how fast that technique was. He couldn't even see Kagura's hand move completely. How fast was that? Kakashi, snap out of it. Guy called, and Kakashi blinked as he noticed Kagura going for Tenten and Sakura. Kakashi cursed before he ran after her. Meanwhile, with the boys, Kaden, Neji shouted as he blasted Bando away from his body. Bando backflipped through the air before he held out both his hands. Everyone saw wind collect into his left and lightning collect in the right. Dai brats, he shouted. Futon. K's Hakai no Jutsu, wind release. Wind breaking technique, Bando shouted as swiped his left hand back and forth as 5 wind blades escaped from them, and he shouted again. Raiden. Daikabu no Jutsu, lightning release. Great strain technique, he hollered, and lightning sprayed from his hand as both elemental affinities went aiming for everyone. Oh shit! Sasuke as he, Neji and Lee jumped away. They turned back and noticed that Naruto hadn't moved. Oi Dobi, get out of there! Sasuke shouted. Naruto glanced towards his teammate before looking back. He closed his eyes and remembered what he read 2 days ago. He pushed his hands across his body and allowed a breath to escape his lips. Rinko, fire! Naruto ordered. Rinko yipped and opened her mouth. As he knew she did that, Naruto surprised everyone as he opened his eyes and swung his hands. Futon. Atsugai, Naruto shouted, and a heavy burst of wind expelled from his body, and it collided with Bando's own wind, breaking it apart and crashed into his lightning. The lightning never stood a chance as it was torn to shreds. What? Bando asked in shock as the wind raced for him, but everyone noticed Rinko blast fire from her out of her mouth. It clashed against the wind and everyone gasped as a heavy firestorm roared over the area. Bando covered his body before it was encased in the fire. A large explosion came down and everyone covered their eyes as they looked at Naruto's slightly panting form. Damn it, how does the Dobi have that much power? Sasuke thought to himself. Neji seemed surprised while Lee gave Naruto a thumbs up, though the blonde couldn't see it. Meanwhile, Naruto looked at his arms and he noticed them trembling. I looks like it was foolish of me to think that I could do that without consequences. It seems Danzo really knew what he was doing when he chose my jutsu, Naruto thought before he stood up. However, he quickly shifted to a defensive stance. He was slammed in the chest and Naruto coughed as he was sent flying through the field. Damn you, brat! I'll kill you! Bando shouted. His hair was slightly burned and so were his clothes. Bando was not happy. He roared and a sudden burst of wind escaped his body as he charged at Naruto. The blonde, still sailing through the air, quickly turned his gaze towards Lee. Lee-san, just like I told you. Go! Naruto shouted as he flung his wires to Lee's leg. Lee quickly dropped down to the ground as Naruto heaved and swung Lee's body. The green-clad shinobi went flying forward and appeared in front of Bando. It was only then did Sasuke and Neji notice Lee had his wrappings undone. Lee's going to use that? Neji wondered while Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Lee appeared just below Bando's chest area and smiled. Guy-sensei, watch as I use the youthful technique that you have given me, Lee said, and he spun on his hands as he swiftly kicked Bando into the air. Bando coughed and went flying before Lee appeared behind him. What the hell do you think you're doing? Bando asked as Lee wrapped him in his bandages. This is the end of our youthful fight. Omid Renge, Lee shouted as he grabbed Bando and swirled head first into the ground. Bando's shouts were apparent before he went crashing into the ground. Lee rolled to the side and panted while Neji and Sasuke seemed ready for anything. However, everyone visibly relaxed as Bando's body dropped to the ground. He didn't move. Phew, that was close, Lee said with a smirk. Everyone else agreed, and before long the sound of cackling assaulted their ears. Turned back and everyone gasped. Back with Kakashi. Kakashi raced after Kagura as Sakura, Kyoko and Tenten had just made it over the hill. Those bitches are Sue, Kagura shouted, and she noticed Kakashi right on her tail. He was going through hand signs that she was all too familiar with. Raiden. Gion, Kakashi shouted as he charged his left hand and launched a wave of lightning at Kagura. The girl dodged to the side and smirked. If only you went after your friends this fast, Senpai, Kagura said, and Kakashi narrowed his eye at what she was mentioning. That won't work, Kagura, Kakashi said, and Kagura whistled. I guess not. Well, fine then. I'll have some fun with you a little more, Kagura said as she stopped. She looked up and she noticed the sun radiating. She did some hand signs and she smiled. For so long I've wanted to be like you. To be your partner, but you never, ever let me in. You just looked at that damn stone day in and day out. Well, guess what? What I was gone, I learned what made you famous. I learned what I could do, Kagura said as she grabbed her hand. Kakashi did the same and cackling was heavy in the air. Guy's fight with the Kagura clone stopped as she poofed out. Senpai, with this, I won't ever need to look at your face again. Kagura shouted as she charged at Kakashi. The Jonin closed his eye and sighed. I never wanted this, but this is my duty, he said and quickly opened his eye. He charged at Kagura also and both held out their Raiden-filled hands. Chidori, Kagura shouted, her hand blazing. Reikiri, Kakashi yelled. Everyone could hear the sound of loud thunder and lightning boom across the field as Kakashi and Kagura passed each other. Senpai, when I get stronger I'll be your partner. You can count on it. After all, the Anbu is a dangerous place, isn't it? Kagura asked at a smiling Kakashi. The Jonin shook his head and patted Kagura. There is no need for that, Kagura. You'll find someone even better than me one day. Till then, grow strong, Kakashi said as he walked away. Kagura frowned and balled her fists. I'll show you, Senpai. I'll make you acknowledge me, Kagura said as she sunshined from Kakashi's rooftop. Kakashi fell to one knee and Kagura chuckled. Of course you would improve it. I underestimated it. Shit, Kagura said as she fell to the ground. Her eyes grew blurry and she noticed Bando in the distance. I can't believe. I partnered with you. Damn it, Kagura said, and she noticed Kakashi had already been looking at her. Don't you dare give me that look, Senpai. Just smile so I can remember that damn face, Kagura said, and Kakashi just closed his eyes. Despite everything, he gave an eye smile while Kagura's blurriness refused to let her fully see it happening. Now that's the Senpai that I wanted to partner with, Kagura said as the light drained from her eyes. As soon as he saw that, Kakashi stopped his smile and frowned. He touched Kagura's white hair before heavily sighing. He looked to his left and he noticed the fate seal on her hand slowly begin to disintegrate until it fully left her hand like it never existed. Kakashi allowed another heavy sigh to escape his lips before he felt Guy pat his shoulder. When she came to me saying that she wanted to be partners, she said that it was to get stronger so that she could be your partner, Guy said, and Kakashi shook his head. I just couldn't. I was weak, Kakashi said while Guy patted his shoulder. Come, we must finish the mission, Guy said, and Kakashi nodded. They looked over and they noticed Naruto, Neji, Sasuke, and Lee walking up to them. Neji and Sasuke looked at the fallen Kagura and snorted. Lee remained silent and Naruto just looked at her body. He had seen this type of stuff so many times in his life. He wasn't dull to it, but he felt the meaning to it, or at least he did more than other times. Naruto went into his pouch and he pulled out a black pill. He bit it and breathed easily. He walked over to her body and placed his hands on the ground. Doden. Miso Earth Release. Earth Burial, Naruto said, and Kagura's body descended into the ground. Naruto gently bowed before walking along. No one said anything as to how the blonde knew Doden techniques as they looked at the burial site. Why would he bury the enemy? Neji asked and Guy patted his shoulder. Respect your enemies when they fall. They have lived their lives. Respect their deaths. Naruto seems to understand this well, Guy said, and Neji just stared at the ground. Let's just get this mission done already, Sasuke said, his clothing looking ragged. Everyone agreed and they walked off. Cha no Kuni. Otu-sama. Kyoko cried as she ran into her father's arms. The daimyo of Tea Country smiled warmly at his daughter's embrace. Kyoko, it's good to have you back. Why are your clothes so dirty? He asked, and Kyoko just smiled while Tenten and Sakura looked off into the distance. They are all right, aren't they? Sakura asked, but Tenten shook her head that she wasn't sure. They both looked over the hill and they noticed the guy coming. Tenten and Sakura beamed as everyone came over the hill. They looked a little ragged, but they were fine. You're all right, Tenten said as Guy and Lee gave thumbs up. Sakura blushed while Sasuke snorted. Neji looked away while Kakashi just seemed to wander. Naruto had a book open so he didn't say anything. As fine as can be. Our youthful opponents were not match for us, Lee said, getting a groan from everyone except Naruto. The blonde did, however, unstrap his gloves and placed them back in his scroll. Ah, Naruto-san, here. I protect him well, Kyoko said, and everyone noticed Fu in her arms. Naruto lowered his book and nodded. Very good, he said and opened his palm. Fu eagerly jumped to his father and snuggled in his embrace. Kyoko bowed and then turned around sadly. Otu-sama, the bearers, didn't make it, she said, and the daimyo sighed with a short nod. I see, he said before turning to the Konoha shinobi. Thank you for protecting my daughter. I'm in your debt, he said, and they just waved him off. Would you like to stay for a rest? He asked, but Kakashi shook his head. Sorry, but we really have to go. We appreciate the offer. Team 7, Team Guy, let's move, Kakashi said, and everyone began to walk away. Naruto turned back and he noticed Kyoko waving goodbye to them all with a happy smile on her face. C-rank mission, success. Yeah, even though it was foolish, Naruto called total bullshit on this.